On the first day of the semester, my roommate was the only one in the whole school who hadn't paid his tuition. When the academic advisor pressed him about it, he claimed his student loan hadn't come through yet. Only I knew the truth. He had used the money to buy lottery tickets and gamble online, because in a past life, he had used fraudulently obtained student loan money to win a few thousand on a lottery ticket and then bragged about it in the dorm. I gently reminded him that making money through luck is fleeting, and he should be wary of things that seem too good to be true. My roommate mocked me, calling me a small-town bookworm who only knows how to cram for exams, destined to live a life of menial labor. Seeing him persist in his delusion, I informed our counselor that my roommate was using his student loan for online gambling. My roommate was made an example of in a disciplinary lecture. The headline, Tsinghua Peking University student gambles with loan, shocking revelation, made the news, and he has held a grudge against me ever since. After he racked up massive debts, he used my identity to borrow millions online, then pushed me off a building and staged it to look like a suicide. When the debt collectors came knocking, my parents were forced to sell our house and farmland. They ended up living in a 300 yuan a month urban village shack, working odd jobs to repay the debt. In the end, my parents worked themselves to death, while he used that money to clear his own debts and lived a carefree life. So, when we returned to the day our homeroom teacher pressed him for tuition, I didn't say a word. Mark, you're the only one who hasn't paid the tuition yet. Get the money into the account ASAP, or else. The academic advisor's tone was urgent. I could hear it even over the phone, yet Mark, my roommate who was being pressed, looked utterly nonchalant. His left foot was in a flip-flop, his right foot was propped up on the chair, his right hand gripped the mouse, scrolling through some flashy, colorful websites. The advisor pressed him a few more times. He responded with a couple of impatient grunts before hanging up the phone. As soon as he hung up the phone, Mark suddenly called us over and said in a hushed, mysterious tone, "Have you guys noticed anything different about me since last semester?" Upon hearing this, our other two roommates began looking Mark up and down. "Your eyes look the same, your nose looks the same, what's up with you? Did you get plastic surgery?" "I didn't mean for you to look at that." Frustrated that his roommates weren't catching his drift, Mark simply pointed to his clothes, his pants, his shoes, and then held out his wrist to show off his new Apple Watch. "Whoa, did you win the lottery or something?" his long-haired roommate Miles exclaimed. Miles was really into streetwear and hype brands, but with his modest budget, he could usually only afford to window shop online, adding items to his cart as a form of wishful thinking. When I found out that Mark, whose family was even worse off than mine, was decked out in designer streetwear with sneakers costing thousands, I almost grabbed him by the shoulders and shook him until he spilled his money-making secrets. Heh, I found a way to make some serious cash, but first, let me show you this. Like a magician, Mark produced a thin piece of paper. "This outfit, I owe it all to this." "Is this a lottery ticket?" Their other roommate, a chubby guy named Greg, voiced his doubt. Mark chuckled and handed them the slip of paper for a closer look. "This isn't your average lottery ticket. Not only are the odds of winning much better, but the top prize is just as big as the regular ones." "That good?" "This isn't some kind of scam, is it?" Miles asked. Half convinced and half skeptical. "If you don't believe it, then don't buy it. A single bet is only $2 anyway. I just spend what I'd pay for a meal, and I can make hundreds of times that back." Hearing Mark say that actually made the two of them a little tempted. After all, it's just the cost of a meal. If I don't win, I'll just think of it like buying a game skin. No big loss. "Well, I'll give it a try," Miles spoke up, and Greg quickly chimed in. Mark excitedly explained to them where to buy lottery tickets and where to check the winning numbers before leaving them to figure it out on their own. Then he looked at me and said, "Ethan, aren't you going to give it a try?" His suspicious gaze swept over me before finally settling on the phone in my hand. "You're not planning to snitch, are you?" I shook my head. "You didn't steal or rob anything. What would I even report? But as for buying lottery tickets, I'll pass. I've had terrible luck since I was a kid, even with drink bottle caps. I only ever get, 'Thanks for your purchase.'" Mark let out a hearty laugh after hearing what I said. "Man, that's rough. I at least get a third-place prize in every draw. People call me the Luck King. I really envy you." I looked at Mark, my gaze filled with sincerity. Seeing I wasn't swayed, Mark tried to persuade me a little more. But then again, luck has a way of balancing itself out, no matter how bad it gets. "Mark, how do we pay for this?" Greg cut Mark off before he could continue trying to persuade me. and the three of us started discussing what numbers to pick for this week's lottery. I quietly turned away and wrote my name in the used textbook I had bought. It was the first day of the new semester, and aside from registration, there wasn't much else going on. After I finished signing my name, the other three had also bought their lottery tickets. Mark then suggested we grab a bite at the barbecue stall just outside the school gate. My treat, Mark said, very generously. Ethan, you're coming too, right? Mark asked me. His words sent me tumbling back into my memories. In my past life, Mark also offered to treat us to barbecue. I turned him down because I wasn't used to such greasy and spicy food, and I didn't want him to spend too much. Later, though, my roommates convinced me to go. I was worried about his expenses and suggested we split the bill. They responded with sarcastic remarks about me being pretentiously generous, and from then on, they started to subtly ostracize me. This sowed the seeds for their later betrayal. So this time, I nodded and said, I'm in. Just so you know, I don't really do beer and barbecue much, so don't try to get me drunk, okay? I pleaded in a deliberately weak tone, which just made Mark burst out laughing. Yeah, we know. Every time we get you a drink, you just nurse it forever. It's a waste of good beer. The three of us are gonna tie one on. Your job is just to make sure we get back to the dorm in one piece. No problem, I agreed without a second thought. The early autumn breeze carried a slight chill as the four of us sat in front of the barbecue stall, digging in heartily. Mark ordered nearly every single item on the menu, averaging at least 5 or 6 skewers of each. With some items reaching over 20, his extravagant ordering spree drew the attention of many other diners. He didn't mind at all. In fact, he seemed to revel in the spotlight. I quietly gnawed on the skewers of meat that kept arriving at the table, occasionally stuffing a vegetable skewer into my mouth, determined to keep myself from speaking, because in my past life, I had also tried to stop Mark when he was ordering, urging him to be more frugal and saying that the four of us could never finish so much food. The result was them mocking me as a country bumpkin. Not only was I forced to eat dozens of greasy, spicy meat skewers, but I was also made to drink 5 bottles of beer. That night, I was writhing in bed with stomach cramps, then completely exhausted myself with diarrhea in the bathroom, which was a disgusting mess from vomiting, while Mark and the others slept soundly in their own beds. I was late for the very first class the next day too, which made a terrible first impression on my major course professor. From then on, I got used to sitting in the back row, basically teaching myself. My grades were just average, completely dashing any hope of getting a postgraduate recommendation. So this time, I chose to keep my mouth shut. I didn't say a word, just let Mark run the barbecue stall owner ragged. When Mark paid, I caught a glimpse out of the corner of my eye that he was using Huawei. I pretended not to see it. Back at the dorm, I showered first. My 2 roommates had gone to the bathhouse for a scrub. While I was packing my bag, Mark got a phone call. It was a call from a bank demanding credit card payment. It turned out he had not only misappropriated his student loan, but also racked up debts at several other banks. The payments were already several days overdue. Yet he ignored it completely and simply blocked the bank's phone number. I pretended not to hear a thing, went about my business washing up, and got into bed. That night, I slept soundly. My stomach felt only a slight discomfort from the greasy food. For the first class the next day, I wasn't late. I sat in the front row of the classroom, back straight, listening intently to the teacher's lecture. Back in the last row seats I'd helped them snag. Mark and the others were excitedly holding their phones, waiting for the lottery results to be announced. I raised my hand to answer the question. After I fluently recited what I'd prepared over the past few days, the teacher smiled with satisfaction, gestured for me to sit down, and gave me extra credit for class participation. Life was gradually getting back on track. I had returned to the university life I had given up in my past life, carrying over the same diligent attitude and work ethic from high school, and I was studying with great seriousness. All my teachers thought highly of me. Not only did I ask questions after class and participate actively during lessons, but I also helped them with various odd jobs. As a result, one of them recommended me for a work-study position, which gave me a little more breathing room for my food expenses. As for my roommates, I didn't pay them much mind anymore. I just saved seats for them in every class. Whether they showed up or not, they wouldn't dare ask me to cover for their attendance either. Since I was on a first-name basis with pretty much every professor, I thought my college life would continue like this, fulfilling yet uneventful. A week later, Mark finally asked to borrow money from me. Ethan, do you have 5,000? I'm in a real bind, man. I had just finished the dinner I'd brought back from the cafeteria. wiping my mouth. I shook my head helplessly. Mark, it's not that I don't want to help you out, I'm just flat broke. I opened up my WeChat Pay, Alipay, and bank apps to show him. The balances were all in the triple digits, and that included the decimal points. I put all my money on my meal card, I finally said. You put all your money on your meal card and this is what you get? Mark asked, his face a picture of disbelief. My dinner was 2 vegetable dishes and a soup, which Mark had watched me pack himself. One dish was spicy and sour shredded potatoes, another was hand-torn cabbage, and there was a bowl of seaweed and egg drop soup that contained neither visible seaweed nor egg ribbons. What can I do? My dad just had surgery, and the family is in urgent need of money, so, my living expenses only cover this kind of food. I started to play the poor card, going on and on about how much my dad's illness and hospital stay cost, how many days off my mom had to take, losing her perfect attendance and all her bonuses. Anyway, it all boils down to just 2 words, broke. Mark didn't let me finish. He waved his hand dismissively, as if he had completely given up on me. I breathed a sigh of relief when I saw him leave the dorm. It was true that my father was hospitalized for surgery, but it was just an appendectomy. He was back on his tricycle tending to the fields within a few days. It's not like I was broke. My parents, though not well off themselves, didn't want me to live too frugally at school, so they gave me a monthly allowance. But what I understood even more clearly was that I couldn't open the floodgates by lending money, especially not to someone who was already neck-deep in the swamp, a gambling addict trying to drag others down with him. That night, Mark came back with his 2 other roommates. They were arm in arm, babbling about doubling up and kickbacks, terms I didn't understand. I turned over in bed, pretending to be fast asleep, and eventually drifted off into a deep slumber. It was the Friday before National Day, and there were no classes in the afternoon. My other 2 roommates were locals and had gone home early, so I was working on the assignment our teacher had given us, too. Suddenly, I heard the creak of a chair. I glanced over and saw Mark spring to his feet. His face was flushed with excitement. I lowered my head and went back to my homework, guessing he must have made a killing. Ethan, you won't believe this. Guess how much I just made? Mark was desperate to show off to someone, and I, in the dorm room, became his target. 1,000, guess again. Mark's eyes were bloodshot, like a bull provoked by a red cape. I held up 5 fingers. $5,000. No. Mark shook his head like a rattle drum, the muscles in his face quivering with excitement as he waited for me to say the answer he had in mind. Well, I really can't guess, I said, feeling a bit awkward. You know how it is. My family's never been well off. I've never even seen that kind of money in my life. 50,000, Ethan. I turned 1,000 into 50 times that. A smile played on Mark's lips, one he couldn't suppress. His breathing was heavy and ragged from the excitement. You're incredible, Mark, to make this much money, and you're only a junior. I let out an admiring sound, and Mark was clearly pleased. Once Miles and the others are back, I'll treat you all to a proper meal. After saying that, Mark settled back into his seat. He first made a voice call. The voice on the other end sounded familiar. It was those 2 roommates. After they had calmed down from their excitement, Mark hung up the phone and immediately launched both his game and streaming software. He was buying a couple of skins here, tipping a streamer a virtual Porsche there. Mark was swamped, spending money like water. So, for the entire National Day holiday, I could hear his excited voice. He was dominating the game in his new skins, trash-talking the noobs on the other team, or chatting up the streamer as her new top donor. This was the case even during the midday break. His racket was so loud that even people in other dorms could hear it, and they complained in the group chat. I didn't say a word. I just picked up my books and headed to the library, because in my past life, I had already asked him to keep it down. Explaining that other students needed to rest, he accused me of being jealous of his side hustle, calling me a hater. He only turned the volume up louder after that, which ended up getting our whole dorm reported and publicly criticized by the Student Council's Residential Affairs Department. I spent a solid 7 days in the library, studying in peace to prepare for the upcoming midterm exams. The night before the exam, my 3 roommates crammed all night, burning the midnight oil with the notes I shared and the key points the professor highlighted. Meanwhile, I slept soundly in my bed the entire night. On exam day, I was sharp and focused, my pen flowing effortlessly. Even after leaving the exam hall, I was still full of energy. In stark contrast, Mark and the other 2 looked like they'd had the life force sucked out of them by a demon. with dark circles under their eyes and utterly drained of energy, but once back in the dorm. Mark suddenly perked up as if he'd been injected with pure adrenaline, my money just multiplied by 10. From that day on, Mark would sit in front of his computer every day, burning the midnight oil until 2 or 3 in the morning, sometimes even pulling all-nighters. Even after the midterm results came out, with his general education courses barely scraping by and 2 major specific courses failing, Mark couldn't have cared less. He even stopped attending classes that took roll call, showing utter contempt for both his participation grades and final exam scores. After the academic advisor came to warn him for the 3rd time, following complaints from his instructors, Mark dropped a bombshell. "What's the damn point of school? I won't even make a tenth of what I earn now after I graduate." Time ticked by, and the New Year's holiday arrived. "My treat for a trip, guys, you in?" Mark patted his travel bag. Clearly having been ready for a while, Miles and Greg agreed immediately. When they looked at me, I scratched my head a little sheepishly. "I'd been asked by the professor to help out in the lab these past few days, so I can't get away." "All right then, you just make sure to keep an eye on the dorm." Mark's tone was casual, as if he were treating me like a guard dog. I didn't argue at all, and simply wished them a good time. So, after I'd been holed up in the lab for 3 days, Mark and the others came back loaded down with shopping bags, all of them beaming. "Ethan, you really missed out on a lot this time." There was a knowing weight to Mark's words, but I played dumb and just asked, "Where did you guys go? I didn't see any posts from you." "Haha." The 3 of them exchanged a look, then spoke in unison. "We just took a stroll through Jean High." I just looked blank. "Jean High? Where's that? I've never heard of it." They were stunned for a second, then burst out laughing. "Ethan, have you fried your brain working all these odd jobs?" "What C? There's no C around here." "I meant the 3 of us went to make some money." I pretended to be stunned, then asked in a low voice, "How much did you make?" 3. Miles immediately held out his hand, raising 2 fingers. 20,000. "That much?" I gasped in a hushed voice. Miles smiled, shook his head, and said, "You're missing a 0. 200,000. My eyes widened. That much? That's why they call it Gold C." Greg's face flushed red. He slung his left arm around my neck, while his right hand waved a thick wad of cash, his laughter ringing in my ears. Mark, however, just smiled and lit a cigarette. The Rolex on his wrist gleamed as he leisurely blew out a smoke ring, letting out a derisive snort through his nose. "Look at you lot, 200 grand and you've already lost your heads." He said it with such contempt, as if he wasn't the same guy who'd been over the moon about a mere 5,000 just 3 months ago. Now that guy next door, he's playing for keeps. "You know how much he pulled in over the last 3 days?" He paused, took a deep drag from his cigarette, and then slowly, deliberately, let out 3 words, 800 grand. The smoke clouded Mark's face again, and I could hear Greg and Miles' sharp intakes of breath perfectly clearly. All I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. 800,000, next door. Was Mark the only one at school involved in gambling? In an instant, my mind was racing. No wonder Mark was so close with the guys in the next dorm in my past life. There was always this one guy from there who looked at me so strangely. For all I know, he might have been in on that scheme in my past life. The one where they took out loans in my name and drove me to jump off a building. How impressive. I practically spat out those words of praise through gritted teeth. Mark flicked the ash from his cigarette. "Exactly, so don't hesitate, Ethan, even with a small stake. Turning it over dozens of times is nothing to sneeze at. As it happens, I've invited that buddy of mine over. He can show you the ropes, so you don't have to scrimp and save like that every day. Money isn't made by pinching pennies, it's made by earning it. Earn it until you're bankrupt and drive people to jump off buildings." I sneered inwardly. They're just trying to drag me down with them, to keep me from spilling the beans someday, just like in my past life. Mark roped in 2 roommates to fake my death, making them accomplices, but of course, I won't say any of this out loud. I need to figure out how to turn down Mark's invitation. Knock, knock, knock. A sudden knock at the door made my heart pound like a drum. "It must be him," Mark said, getting up to answer the door. A bead of cold sweat trickled down my forehead. I'd used all those excuses to refuse him too many times before. "Is it too late to leave now?" The door swung open, only one person entered. Yet he nearly filled the entire doorway. It was definitely the guy from the dorm next door, Finn, I think his name was. Running into him before, I just thought he was big, but now, standing in the doorway, his presence felt almost physically oppressive. A simple, solid black t-shirt clung to his frame, outlining his well-developed chest muscles, the fabric pulled taut, the watch on his wrist, with its exceptionally complex style, spoke volumes about his extraordinary status without uttering a word. His expression was blank, but as his gaze swept over the room, it instantly extinguished the excited energy coming from Greg and the others. Mark stiffened for a moment too, then quickly plastered on an eager, almost ingratiating smile. "Phone, come on in. Sorry about the mess, I just got back to the dorm, watch your step." Finn walked in without a word, and the dorm room instantly felt cramped. His gaze swept over a few bulging red luggage bags on the floor, showing no particular interest, before finally settling on me. "Who's this?" His voice was low and slightly raspy. "My roommate, total academic weapon," Mark chimed in quickly, nudging me with his elbow. "We were just talking about him. The guy's got a one-track mind, all study, no play. He really missed out by not coming with us this time. Finn, do you think, maybe next time you could show him the ropes, let him get a piece of the action too? You want in on this too?" Finn's gaze, like his name, was a cold blade, trying to pierce right through to the back of my eyes. Behind him, Mark and the other two had a glint of something fierce in their eyes. Mixed in with the excitement and anticipation, my throat went dry, and a cold sweat instantly broke out on my back. They were dead serious this time. They were determined to drag me down with them, no matter what. What was I supposed to do? Bzzzt. Ding ding ding. The phone on the desk rang, its screen lit up, and a glaring contact name flashed into view, Vice Dean Zhang. Like a drowning person clutching at a life raft, I fought the urge to snatch the phone and instead picked it up with feigned nonchalance. "Dean Zhang wants to see me. Probably about the experiment." "Finn, Mark, sorry, just a moment." Mark's expression darkened, clearly annoyed, and he opened his mouth as if to say something more. Knock, knock, knock. Another round of knocking sounded, more urgent and impatient than Finn's had been. "Hey, Finn, you in there?" From the other side of the door, the person outside spoke in a rapid-fire rush. "Get back here, now. The student council is doing a surprise dorm check. The advisor is already downstairs. They just sent the notice in the group chat, as if to prove his point." Our phones all chimed and buzzed in near-perfect unison. In the class and dormitory group chats, messages from the counselor at ING everyone were flooding the screen, clearly announcing that post-holiday dorm inspections were starting immediately and that everyone must be in their rooms. In an instant, the atmosphere in the dorm room shifted. The expressions on Greg and Miles's faces morphed from shock to panic as they frantically gathered up the conspicuous cash from the desk. Mark, meanwhile, forcefully zipped up his duffel bag and tossed it into the wardrobe. Finn frowned, a flicker of clear displeasure crossing his face. He gave me a long, searching look, then swept his gaze over the chaotic scene with Mark and the others. Without another word, he turned sharply, pulled the door open, and strode out. The door slammed shut with a loud clang, cutting off the growing noise and footsteps from the hallway outside. Leaning against the cold wall, I let out a long, shaky breath. My palms slick with cold sweat. For the first time, I felt a profound sense of gratitude, born of having narrowly escaped disaster, for the dormitory inspection system that everyone usually complains about. After calming myself, I pressed the call button. "Hello, Dean Zhang. I apologize for not checking my phone earlier." In the following days, Mark and the others didn't bring up the matter of letting me in on the deal. Mark had his eye on a new way to make money, the stock market. But it's no wonder Mark dove right in. Even I had heard the buzz, and now even the elderly folks at the wet market can chat animatedly about the stock market. While it wasn't as quick a buck as before, watching the candlestick charts gave him a real sense of involvement. So, Miles, Greg, and the others all jumped into the stock market too, becoming amateur investors, and even bought the same stock as Mark. The moment his final exams were over, Mark rushed back to his dorm and eagerly opened the app. 3 consecutive limit-up days. We really picked a winner with this one. We should have invested more. Greg and Miles sighed in unison. It was their first time buying stocks, and they hadn't dared to put in much money. Going all in is a form of wisdom. Mark shot them a dismissive glance, then doubled down on his position with a bold declaration. "This one's definitely going to keep climbing." Miles and Greg exchanged a look, then threw half their net worth into the pot. As for me, I quietly opened my email to confirm the interview time from the tech giant. In 3 days, in the neighboring city, since the first round interview results would be announced on the same day, determining if I'd make it to the second round the next day. I not only bought a bullet train ticket to the neighboring city but also booked a hotel for 2 nights. Spending over $400 in an instant made my wallet ache. But listening to Mark and the others chanting, up, 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 like a mantra, I actually felt a sense of calm settle over me. After messaging my academic advisor and Vice Dean Zhang to request leave, and rescheduling my weekend part-time work, I washed up and got into bed. The background noise was still Mark and his crew's racket, which didn't let up until the dead of night. For the next few days, a tense, restless energy hung in the dorm room air. Mark was practically glued to his computer. Eyes locked on the dancing green and red lines, muttering half-baked stock market jargon under his breath. Like devoted acolytes, Greg and Miles orbited around him, whooping and hollering with every uptick of the line as if they could already hear the cash register cha-chinging. On the third day, I got up early as usual to run my experiment and took the opportunity to tidy up my resume. When I got back to the dorm at 2 in the afternoon, I was nearly shocked by the scene that greeted me. The floor was littered with empty bottles, and the air was thick with a nauseating mix of stale smoke and alcohol. For a moment, I thought I'd walked into the wrong room. Miles was slumped in his chair, staring blankly at the ceiling. Greg was slumped over the desk, his face buried in his arms, completely motionless. Mark sat directly on the floor, clutching an empty bottle, his back against a chair leg, his head hung low, his face ashen, like a limp rag. I glanced at the computer screen. The near-vertical plunge of the green line explained the state all three of them were in. It's over, we're completely trapped. Miles's voice was hoarse, his eyes filled with despair. Mark jerked his head up, his eyes bloodshot, and glared viciously at the ground before hurling the empty bottle against the corner of the wall. With a sharp crack, shards of glass flew everywhere. Those damn bookies, fucking bastards, he roared, his voice cracking with a sob. With that final outburst, the last of his strength drained away. His head slumped heavily forward, and his shoulders sagged. In the deathly silence, only the sound of heavy breathing remained. I kept a straight face, returned to my seat, put down my backpack, and then spoke. I don't know much about stocks, but as long as you don't click sell, the loss on paper isn't a real loss, right? All three of them looked up almost simultaneously, their expressions blank yet tinged with a faint glimmer of hope as they turned to me. I pulled out the chair and sat down, running through the talking points I'd picked up online. Isn't the stock market all about ups and downs? If you sell now, you're just locking in your losses and letting them take your money. Hold on, it might bounce back tomorrow. My words seemed to have some effect. A flicker of life returned to Mark's vacant eyes. Miles slowly straightened up in his seat, and Greg lifted his head. Yeah, Miles licked his chapped lips. Mark, Ethan's right. We haven't sold anything yet. That means we haven't lost a dime. Mark took a few ragged breaths. A glint of grim determination returned to his eyes. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, braced himself on the chair, and shakily pushed himself to his feet. Damn right. Hell no, I'm not selling. Let's see who blinks first. The atmosphere in the room thawed slightly. It was still heavy, but the suffocating silence had been broken. Greg even made a feeble attempt to start cleaning up the broken glass on the floor. Just then, the phone on Mark's desk rang out sharply, not with a normal ringtone, but with a specially set alarm. As the sound pierced the air, Mark's expression changed visibly. He glanced at the screen, and his face went a shade paler than before, his fingers trembling. He hesitated for several seconds before shakily swiping to answer and pressing the phone to his ear. Hello. The dorm was quiet, the voice on the other end of the line was muffled, but you could make out a man speaking rapidly, his tone urgent and aggressive. Dripping with hostility, Mark's posture unconsciously slumped. Beads of sweat formed on his forehead as he nodded repeatedly into the phone, his voice weak and pleading. Yes, I know, but right now it's just a couple more days, please. Suddenly, the voice on the other end sharply raised in volume. Even through the receiver, we could faintly hear a crystal-clear threat. If you don't pay up, you're gonna regret it. I'll make you wish you were dead. You hear me? Mark shuddered violently, nearly dropping his phone. The color completely draining from his face. Thump, thump, thump. Almost the instant the call ended on the other end, a knock sounded on the dorm room door. The sound wasn't loud, yet it was unnervingly clear. Each knock fell like a hammer blow on everyone's already taut nerves. 5. The atmosphere, which had just begun to ease, instantly grew even more tense. Mark's head snapped up, his eyes wide with terror as they fixed on the door, trembling in their sockets. Who was it? Had the debt collectors found him this quickly, or something else? Mark's face turned as white as a sheet, his legs shaking uncontrollably. Miles and Greg froze, holding their breath. They exchanged terrified glances, as if the Grim Reaper himself were standing outside the door. After a brief silence, a slightly impatient voice came from outside the door. Is anyone in 416? Emergency notice from the advisor. The whole major needs to assemble immediately in the lecture hall of Building 3. Hurry up, that was the voice of the dorm monitor from next door. Phew, you could almost hear the sound of 3 hearts simultaneously dropping back into place. Mark swayed as if all strength had left him, steadying himself against the edge of the desk before managing to croak out a reply. I'm here, got it, coming right now. The sound of footsteps faded away down the hall. A heavy, post-crisis silence settled over the dorm room, but the tension in the air hadn't fully dissipated. Mark wiped the cold sweat from his brow, his gaze still distant. Miles and Greg struggled to their feet, their movements stiff. Let's go, the meeting. Mark was the first to shuffle toward the door, watching their almost perfectly synchronized retreat. I clutched my stomach and said, you guys go ahead, I need to hit the bathroom first. Mark waved a dismissive hand, too annoyed to bother with me, then pulled the door open and shuffled out in his slippers with the other 2. The moment the door clicked shut, the expression dropped from my face. I quickly threw the deadbolt. I then hurried to my desk, yanked open the drawer, and shoved my second-hand laptop, hard drive, and an old wallet containing my bank cards and ID into the backpack I always carried. I then walked over to the wardrobe, put all my clothes inside, took out my key, and locked the small padlock. Only after doing all that did I sling my bag over my shoulder, pull the door open, and walk out. The lecture hall was huge, but it was packed to the brim with students from all 4 classes of our major. I arrived late, and the only empty seats left were in the very front 2 rows. I ended up sitting right under the teaching assistant's nose. The counselor stood at the podium, holding the roster, and began calling out names. As each name was read, a scattered chorus of "here" rose from the students. When the roll call finished, only Finn was absent. The counselor, however, seemed unconcerned. He simply made a mark on the roster and set it aside. All right, settle down. He rapped on the desk. One last meeting before the break to go over winter holiday safety. Pay close attention, especially with all the online scams and gambling traps going around these days. I want everyone's ears perked up. His voice was stern. Don't you dare believe that nonsense about making easy money from fake reviews or getting rich through online gambling. It's all a trap. Get involved, and you'll lose everything you have. His gaze swept across the room, as if to drive the point home, and he dropped a real-life example. Just look at what happened recently. Finn from the dorm next door. Seemed like a smart guy, right? Well, he got into online gambling and fell right into the trap. He's still down at the police station giving a statement. I heard the site that scammed him just packed up and vanished last night, taking all the money with it. He's been cleaned out. Boom. Not far behind me, I could almost hear the sound of a psychological defense crumbling. I didn't need to turn around to picture the expressions on Mark and the others' faces. Immediately, a wave of frantic, stifled commotion erupted behind me, the sudden glow of phone screens, the frantic rustling of fingers swiping, all punctuated by short, panicked gasps that slipped out despite their best efforts to hold them back. The counselor noticed the disturbance from that direction and frowned. What's going on back there? Is there a problem? And no, nothing's wrong. Mark's voice shot up, trembling noticeably. Counselor, we're not feeling well. Must be something we ate. We'd like to go back and rest. Without waiting for the counselor's response, the 3 of them practically scrambled out of their seats, the screech of their shoes scraping the floor echoing in the room. Under a sea of astonished stares, they stumbled out the back door, pale-faced and drenched in sweat, looking as frantic as if they were being chased by ghosts. The meeting continued for another 10 minutes or so, emphasizing fire safety, theft prevention, and scam awareness. After the meeting adjourned, the crowd bustled out. I was called back. Ethan, hold on a second. The counselor beckoned me over. My heart sank, but I kept my composure and walked over. You're in the same dorm as them, right? The counselor studied my expression. What's going on with Mark and the others? They look awful. Did they eat something bad? I paused to consider my words, then shook my head. I'm not really sure. Maybe they haven't been getting enough rest lately. The counselor seemed to just ask offhandedly and didn't press further, knowing I had an interview today. He reminded me a couple more times to stay safe over the break, then waved me off, Stepping out of the academic building, a gust of cold wind hit me, and I finally let out a breath I'd been holding in. I walked straight to the bus stop outside the school gate and boarded the bus heading for the train station. Half an hour later, I was already settled into a window seat on the bullet train bound for the neighboring city. As the train pulled away, the scenery outside the window began to accelerate into a blurry retreat, the city's skyscrapers gradually giving way to open fields. Resting my chin in my hand, I gazed at my own faint reflection in the glass and the barren, wintry fields rushing past outside. The pale, panic-stricken faces of Mark and the others lingered stubbornly before my eyes. In my past life, it was the same story. The online gambling site vanished, and Mark and the others were left in utter despair and ruin. But when all three of them turned to look at me, the fear on their faces twisted into greed, the relentless debt collection calls, the threats at my door, even the humiliation of dropping out in the end. I bore it all for them. If we go through this again, what will their fate be? Hounded by debt collectors, terrorized by threats, too afraid to go home for the holidays, or, something even worse, the chill of the window seeped through the glass. I narrowed my eyes slightly, a cold, hard calm settling in my heart. Without me, the fool, standing in front to take the heat, the fire they started would eventually burn them. I was very curious to know how it would end for them. 9. I never expected the end to come so quickly. Both rounds of interviews went extremely well, and the interviewer explicitly said they were looking forward to working with me. After signing the preliminary offer letter, I returned to campus the following morning. The sky was overcast, yet my mood was surprisingly good. As I approached the dormitory building, I saw a large, dense crowd gathered ahead. Then, I witnessed a figure leap from the rooftop with my own eyes. Amidst the gasps, screams, and clamor of voices, I remained eerily calm. A dark liquid spread across the ground, staining the Rolex watch he had flaunted in front of me countless times. Soon after, police tape was strung up, blocking the entrance to our dormitory building. Over the next few days, officers came by in several rounds, going from room to take statements and gather information. I was called in for questioning 3 separate times, each time recounting in detail everything I knew, how they got excited, how they lost money, how they met Finn, and how, after I tried to console them, I left directly for an out-of-town job interview. My academic advisor also had several serious talks with me, their gaze a mix of scrutiny and exhaustion, trying to find in me some possible trigger for the tragedy. But I acted composed yet shaken, appropriately showing the relief of having survived a close call, and sorrow over my roommate having gone astray. Professor, I'm really scared. I hung my head, my voice trembling slightly. If I hadn't gone to the interview, if I'd just stayed in the dorm, I don't know what would have happened. The counselor finally let out a sigh and patted my shoulder. All right, it's okay, this wasn't your fault. You're a victim too. If you hadn't been so insistent, you might have. Go back and get some proper rest. Try not to dwell on it. The truth of the investigation came to light quickly. After the website went down that day, a fierce conflict erupted in the dorm. Mark completely lost it. Miles and Greg poured all their rage and fear onto him, accusing him of dragging them down with him. In his utter despair and fury, Mark lashed back, roaring that it was their bad luck that had caused everything. The argument quickly escalated into a physical fight, which was broken up by students from the neighboring dorm who had rushed over upon hearing the commotion. In the chaos, Miles and Greg insisted to the dorm supervisor and police officers who had arrived to mediate that Mark had thrown the first punch, passionately describing his irrational and frenzied behavior. Mark was consumed by utter isolation and resentment. No one had expected that he, who usually just seemed a bit vain and short-tempered, would do something so horrifying under extreme emotional distress. He somehow got his hands on a potent rat poison and put it in the dorm's water dispenser. After watching the 2 of them collapse to the ground, writhing in agony, he climbed up to the rooftop of the dormitory and jumped. Miles and Greg were rushed to the hospital, though they survived. Their nervous systems and organs suffered permanent damage, requiring long-term rehabilitation. They had to take a leave of absence from school and were taken home by their families, their futures now bleak. Mark died on the spot. The matter did not end with his death. He came from an ordinary rural family. His parents rushed to the school in a state of utter despair, not only grappling with the agony of losing their son but also horrified to discover he had racked up massive online loan debts. The loan sharks soon tracked down the grief-stricken parents, threatening and intimidating them, demanding the father pay for the son's debts. Having lost their only son, the couple redirected all their despair and rage toward the school. They held up white banners, wore mourning clothes, and blockaded the school entrance day and night, wailing and causing a scene. They demanded the school take responsibility for its negligent oversight and for driving their son to his death. Seeking exorbitant compensation, local media swarmed to the story. With sensational headlines, top student plunged into online gambling, poisoning and leaped to death ends in tragedy, bloodshed triggered by campus loans. Who is to blame for the fall of the provincial top scorer? The school administrators were thrust into the spotlight, overwhelmed as they juggled inquiries from the investigation team and the victims' families while fending off the relentless media. All in a desperate attempt to contain the massive scandal, I moved quietly through all the chaos and noise, a complete outsider. A year and a half later, 18 months is enough time for a horrifying tragedy to fade from its raw, bloody reality into mere campus lore, forgotten dust in the corners of the internet. Mark's parents eventually accepted the school's humanitarian compensation and left in silence. Miles and Greg, who had taken a leave of absence, would occasionally pop up in the class group chat at first, posting recovery photos and trying to sound optimistic. But after the winter break ended and the new semester began, they never showed up again, quietly leaving the group. Graduation season had arrived. The air was filled with the faint scent of gardenias and the melancholy of parting. Figures in graduation gowns were everywhere, their laughter and chatter masking the underlying confusion about the divergent paths that lay ahead. I stood before the bulletin board, which was posted with the list of this year's outstanding graduates and the postgraduate recommendation admissions notice. 6. The name Ethan appeared in the first few rows, followed by a long list of accolades: national scholarship, outstanding graduation thesis, gold medal in the XX competition. My phone vibrated. It was the third offer confirmation email arriving from that major tech company next door where I had interned. The salary package was so generous it made the classmate who happened to glance over gasp in shock. It's our class's turn for the photo. The class monitor called the scattered students back. I calmly turned off my screen and walked to the photo platform set up in front of the library. The counselor stood in the center of the front row. Seeing me, he smiled and nodded in acknowledgement. His smile was full of heartfelt relief, mixed with a trace of barely perceptible release from tension. The student at the eye of the storm, whom he had once feared would be affected by the incident, ultimately became the brightest highlight on his performance review. To him and everyone else, I had perfectly sidestepped the quagmire that constantly sought to pull me in. Through my own diligence and excellence, I had embarked on a bright, unimpeachable path. 3, 2, 1, say cheese. After the graduation photos were taken, I returned to the dorm. The hallway was filled with packed luggage and discarded junk. I went back to that dorm room of mine, the one that had been sealed up after I moved out. The seal had long since lost its grip, and the inside had been cleared out, leaving only a bare bed frame and a dusty desk. There was nothing left worth holding on to. I closed the door, sealing the past inside. The moment I walked out of the school gate, pulling my suitcase, I glanced back. The setting sun cast a warm, golden glow upon the school gate, a sight both comforting and dazzling that I had never truly noticed in all my years. As I turned to leave, the evening light enveloped me as well. It paved a broad and promising road for my future. Story 2. The day after my husband rented out our house to his first love, a terrifyingly extreme cold weather arrived. In order to curry favor with her, my husband gave away the last remaining food we had, leaving my daughter and me to fend for ourselves. My daughter cried incessantly from hunger. I knelt on the ground, knocking my head until it bled, and demanded harshly why he could be so cruel. But he broke my legs, kicked me out of the house, and I was left to freeze to death outside. When I opened my eyes again, hearing my husband's request to rent the house to his first love's family, I smiled and nodded in agreement. Then I turned around and stuffed the refrigerator with rotten vegetable leaves. In this life, I will enjoy delicious grilled meat and hot pot with my daughter while watching them kill each other and freeze to death. 1. Wife. Haley has just divorced. She's a young girl who's unfamiliar with this place and came to seek my help. I can't be so heartless as to ignore her, can I? My husband said with a worried look on his face in the living room. I stared at him blankly, clutching the keys in my hand, and my body couldn't stop trembling, seeing that I didn't respond. He couldn't hold back his anger any longer and kicked the sofa violently. Can you stop being so suspicious every day? I grew up with her. I only see her as a sister. Do you want me to just watch her sleep on the streets? There's no room for discussion on this matter. I've already promised to rent the house to her. Give me the keys now." Hearing his familiar roar, I suddenly raised my head and stared at him fixedly. A chill rushed from the soles of my feet all the way to the top of my head. The bone-chilling cold made me feel dazed. The deep-seated cold that had penetrated my bones before I died in my previous life appeared again. "Mom and Dad, don't quarrel." My daughter, Giselle, wrinkled her nose, rushed back, and hugged my leg. Her timid eyes made my heart ache. She turned around to hold my husband's hand, but he pushed her away in disgust, and tears welled up in her eyes instantly. Looking at the undisguised disgust in the man's eyes, a layer of cold sweat broke out on my back. It turned out that there really are fathers in this world who don't love their own children. In my previous life, in order to curry favor with his first love, Haley, my husband couldn't wait to give her all the remaining food in the house. He ignored my daughter and me even though we were starving. Haley's son spat on my daughter's face and showed off proudly. "Uncle Garrett said that you're just a waste of money. You should have been drowned in the toilet when you were born. Women are born to serve men, and you're just as bitchy as your mother." He ate the food that originally belonged to us mouthful by mouthful, treating us like a joke. Haley stroked her son's head, praised him for scolding us well, and then turned around and snatched away the last heating stove in my room. The relationship between Garrett and me has lasted for more than 30 years. How can you, an outsider, compare to it? You're so naive. I gritted my teeth in hatred and rushed forward to try to take the things back, but my husband broke my legs. My daughter and I were driven out of the house and froze to death in the extremely cold and snowy apocalypse. Fortunately, perhaps even God couldn't stand it anymore and gave me a chance to be reborn. There are still nearly half a month left before the arrival of the extremely cold apocalypse. And I have plenty of time to prepare. This time, I will definitely make these ungrateful people pay for their debts with their blood. I want them to live a life worse than death, too. I decisively stuffed the keys into my husband's hand, interrupting his hysterical roar. I smiled and said, "What's wrong with that?" At first, I was thinking that the second floor hasn't been lived in for so long and is full of dust. I would clean it for a few days before letting Sister Haley live there. Hearing me say this, my husband was suddenly at a loss for words and looked at me suspiciously. He gave a cold snort, and his face turned from gloomy to sunny. "You're right to think that way. We don't have a son to carry on the family line. I've already regarded Haley's son, Easton, as my own child. You have to be nicer to them, mother and son, in the future," he preached arrogantly, and the absurd words coming out of his mouth made me sneer inwardly. Sure enough, Garrett came from the countryside, and the idea of preferring sons over daughters is deeply ingrained in his mind. He has always been resentful that I only gave birth to a daughter. It turned out that he had already regarded his first love's child as his own son so early on. No wonder in my previous life he was so eager to curry favor with them. It was all for his so-called heir to the throne. I smiled perfunctorily at my husband and made an excuse to go grocery shopping and took my daughter out. As soon as we went out, I noticed that my daughter's eyes were red. She buried her head in my chest and said in a muffled voice, "Mom, doesn't Dad like Giselle? Is Giselle a bad child?" My heart ached slightly, looking at my little sweetheart's cautious expression. I wished I could cut Garrett, that bastard, into pieces. How could Giselle be a bad child? You're the apple of my eye. Dad is bad, let's not play with him, okay? I soothed my daughter's emotions and took her to the amusement park to have fun all day long. Only after we were both full did we go to the vegetable market and pick up a few pieces of rotten vegetable leaves and go home. In my previous life, I had the habit of stockpiling goods. The refrigerators on both the upper and lower floors were stuffed full. My favorite thing to do was to stay at home and prepare ingredients. The supplies at home in my previous life could almost feed our family of 3 for a whole 3 months. Unfortunately, in the end, my ungrateful husband gave them all away. Thinking of this, I put all the fresh ingredients in the refrigerator into the trunk of the car and stuffed it back with the rotten vegetable leaves and stinky fish and shrimp I picked up. In this life, I want to see how these two ungrateful people can survive without the food I prepared. When I got home, my husband was slouching on the sofa, happily making a video call. A woman's affected voice came from the phone. Her coquettish tone made me feel goosebumps all over. I could tell it was Haley at once. "Garrett, I don't want to affect the relationship between you and sister-in-law because of me. I'd better rent a house outside." As soon as my husband heard this, he immediately became unhappy. He said anxiously, "How can that be? You're a young girl with a simple mind. It's so easy for you to be deceived in a big city, it's too dangerous. What's more, I'm her husband, she doesn't dare not listen to me. As he said this, he turned his head and gave me a fierce glare, showing his ferocious expression. Garrett, you've always been the best to me all these years. If you hadn't left back then, we might now. The woman in the video had tears in her eyes. Her inviting and hesitant gaze lingered on Garrett, captivating him completely. I sneered inwardly and pretended to Luke, husband, you haven't given me my living expenses recently. The remaining money is only enough to buy these half-price vegetable leaves. Garrett's face froze. He couldn't stand losing face in front of his first love. He grandly took out his salary card from his wallet and threw it in my face, gritting his teeth to endure the pain in his heart. He said, money, money. All you think about is money all day long. I think you've fallen into the money pit. Take it. It's as if I've been treating you unfairly, useless thing. I hated him so much that my teeth were clenched, but I still endured my anger and picked up the salary card. Garrett has always been stingy and never handed over his salary. He only gave me 1,000 yuan as living expenses every month. Now that he took the initiative to give me the money to show off, how could I not make good use of it? Hiding the hatred in my eyes, I ignored his fierce gaze and took my daughter out again. I will definitely make this scumbag man and that bitch woman experience the despair and pain I felt in my previous life. Only then can they pay for their crimes with their blood. 3. When my parents passed away, they left me a shop on a prosperous street, which is worth over 7 million yuan in the market. Before my father died, he insisted that I swear to heaven that I wouldn't tell my husband about their only inheritance, for fear that I would have no way out left. At that time, I was very puzzled. Now I finally understand his good intentions. I went to the real estate agency and asked them to sell this shop as quickly as possible and that it must be a full payment. I also made it clear that if it was sold on the same day, I would give the salesperson a 10% commission, and the commission would decrease by 1% for each day of delay. Money can make the devil turn the millstone. That night, this shop was successfully sold for 6 million yuan after tax. And I received a full 4 million yuan. There are only a little over 10 days left before the extremely cold apocalypse arrives. In the next half-month, the weather will suddenly drop to more than 100 degrees below zero. Passers-by who don't have time to go home will be frozen into human-shaped ice sculptures. The road communication system will be completely paralyzed, and the human population worldwide will decrease rapidly. I hugged my daughter's soft body tightly and made up my mind to use this 5 million plus yuan to create the safest shelter for us. According to my experience in my previous life, the safest place is near the military garrison. I found a single-family villa, right next to the army combat team. There are few people around, almost no one lives there, and the rent is very low. I immediately paid the rent for 3 months, looking at the 3-story villa with a small courtyard, which is nearly 600 square meters. My heart, which had been filled with fear and unease, finally settled down a little. I found the largest decoration company in the city and asked them to replace all the wall materials of the villa with thermostatic ones, and use the most advanced insulation equipment to ensure that the room is warm and comfortable 24 hours a day. I also required that this decoration must be carried out secretly and as quickly as possible. At first, I was worried that the boss would leak the news, but when I put a 3 million yuan check in front of him, he tactfully swallowed his doubts. He looked at me as if I were the god of wealth and repeatedly assured me, when the money is in place, the people will be in place. In just 1 week, he mobilized all his workers and completed my request at the fastest speed. He transformed the entire villa into a modern high-tech thermostatic room, plus dozens of high-capacity storage batteries. Just then, my dear husband finally thought of me. As soon as I answered the phone, his furious roar resounded throughout the entire villa. Isla, where the hell have you gone? You haven't been home for over a week. Are you out there looking for another man behind my back? Get back and cook right away. Haley is here. How can you, as a sister-in-law, not show up? In the chaotic background noise, the sound of a child crying and demanding food came. It was obviously Haley's gluttonous son. Haley's hypocritical words came, Garrett, don't be angry. Talk to sister-in-law nicely. It won't be good if you get angry. I felt nauseous hearing this and said coldly, I have something to do outside. You're a grown man with hands and feet. Can't you cook for yourself? Garrett's voice paused, as if he couldn't believe that I, who had always been obedient to him, would one day dare to talk back to him. The next second, he exploded completely. If you don't come back to cook tonight, you'll bear the consequences." With that, he hung up the phone neatly. My hand holding the phone gradually tightened, and I was so angry that my chest rose and fell. I immediately used his salary card to buy a large number of food items through a large local supermarket's purchasing service, setting the delivery time for 7 days later and the payment method as pay after use. Looking at the continuous consumption reminders on my phone, I felt secretly delighted. In 3 days, when that stingy miser finds out that his card has been maxed out, how wonderful his expression will be. For, during the time I was renovating the villa, the low temperature warning from the Meteorological Bureau had reached its peak. In the scorching summer, the temperature dropped sharply to more than 10 degrees below zero in just half a month. People took off their short sleeves and shorts and put on thick down jackets amidst curses. However, what was even more terrifying was that in the heat of August, it suddenly snowed heavily like goose feathers one early morning. The abnormal weather conditions quickly caused chaos, and many people began to hoard supplies frantically. I deliberately ignored Garrett for a few days and secretly delighted in watching him raging uselessly on the surveillance, taking advantage of this time gap. The supplies I had previously purchased from a large supermarket under the pretext of donating to children in mountainous areas had already arrived. Hundreds of caddies of frozen chicken, duck, fish, and meat, vegetables, dried fruits, flour, rice, prefabricated dishes of various flavors, dozens of cases of instant food, and snack dried fruits. These things will become the greatest support for my daughter and me to survive in the future extreme cold apocalypse. Considering that the communication system will also be interrupted in a while, I also downloaded hundreds of animated cartoons, movies, and TV shows. I also bought some textbooks and reading materials for my daughter to ensure that we wouldn't be too bored in the villa. In addition, learning from my experience in my previous life, I went to the black market and purchased a self-defense weapon through special channels. I also installed an electric fence around the villa that was powerful enough to electrocute people to prevent evil-mind people from coming to steal food. After all, in the apocalypse, the hearts of people are scarier than ghosts. I didn't go home until my husband and his first love's family were starving to death. I carried a few hard-as iron frozen manta buns, smeared some soot on my face, and went home with a mournful look. As soon as I entered the house, my husband rushed over angrily and tried to hit me, but I was one step ahead of him. I stepped forward and clung tightly to his leg, wailing and crying with tears and snot streaming down my face. "Husband, it's my fault. I've been out for so long trying to buy food for you, but now the prices are soaring, and I managed to grab these few manta buns with all my might." Looking at the manta buns covered in dirt, Haley's face turned extremely ugly. However, Easton, who was so hungry that he saw stars, didn't care so much. He snatched them away and ate two in just a few bites, choking and stretching his neck. Looking at his voracious eating, a flash of darkness passed through my eyes. "Eat, eat, eat your fill so you can go to hell." Seeing my disheveled appearance, Garrett finally didn't land his fist on me. In just a few days, the three of them had been living on the rotten vegetable leaves and stinky fish and shrimp in the refrigerator. All three of their faces were sallow and emaciated. Now that the temperature has dropped sharply and prices are soaring, everyone has realized the importance of saving their lives. By the time the slow-witted two of them realized it, the money in their hands could only barely buy a few bags of instant noodles, not to mention Easton, that glutton who only knew how to eat voraciously. In just 1 week, they had run out of food and supplies. In the extremely cold apocalypse, besides hunger, the most terrifying thing is the extreme low temperature. The heating system in the community has long been frozen and unable to operate. They can only rely on buying underground heating at a high price to get by. However, the price keeps soaring and has already reached tens of thousands of yuan a day, which is obviously beyond what Garrett's wallet can afford. The three of them, cold and hungry, curled up in the thin quilt, their lips turning purple and snot and tears flowing down their faces. However, this is just an appetizer I gave them. Something even worse is yet to come. 5. That night, the laxative I put in the steamed buns took effect. The three of them vomited and had diarrhea, suffering a great deal. Among them, Haley's son, Easton, was in the worst condition and was already exhausted from diarrhea. Haley was terrified. She held her son and wailed, with big tears dropping onto the floor. She rummaged through the cabinets in a panic but couldn't find any anti-diarrheal medicine. She sobbed pitifully. "Garrett, I beg you to take Easton to the hospital and save him. He's the apple of my eye. How can I live if anything happens to him?" My husband couldn't bear to see his first love cry, But now the weather outside was so cold that it could freeze people to death. The nearest hospital was a full 3 kilometers away, and he couldn't risk his life. The chubby boy clutched his stomach, breaking out in a cold sweat from the pain. I gave him double the dose, ensuring he would suffer a great deal. Looking at his embarrassed and painful appearance, I remembered the scene in my previous life when he punched and kicked my daughter and forced us to drink his urine. His proud face at that time overlapped with his current appearance covered in cold sweat, and I felt a sense of satisfaction in my heart. My husband was so anxious that he paced back and forth, but he still hesitated to go out, seeing his cowardly appearance. Haley gritted her teeth, picked up Easton, and went out. She played the role of a pitiful woman, saying, "Since Garrett doesn't want to, I won't force him. At worst, Easton and I, a widow and her son, will die outside. Anyway, no one in this world really cares about me." This trick always worked on Garrett. He couldn't stand being looked down upon by his first love. The next second, he turned his gaze on me. "Isla, you take Easton to the hospital. I'm the breadwinner of the family and can't afford to collapse. It's different for you. As a useless woman, you're the most suitable to go." Haley also reacted and rushed over to grab my arm tightly, her voice shrill. "Yes, you're the most suitable to take Easton to the hospital. I beg you, sister-in-law." As she spoke, she desperately knelt on the ground and kowtowed to me until her forehead turned blue and purple. I deliberately pretended to be scared and said, "No, no. The temperature outside can freeze people to death. I'll die if I go out." My husband glared at me angrily and stuffed Easton into my arms without giving me a chance to argue. "You bitch, shut up. I told you to go, so go quickly. If Easton can't be cured, don't even think about coming back." A strong hurricane swept in with snow and wind. I shivered from the cold and held the doorknob tightly, pleading, "Husband, please. I've been with you for so many years. You can't treat me like this." Garrett was furious. He raised his hand and slapped me, so hard that I was knocked to the ground. His eyes were fierce as he threatened, "Stop talking nonsense. Hurry up and take Easton to the hospital, or you'll be in big trouble." The next second, the door slammed shut, showing no mercy. The expression on my face instantly turned cold, and I stared coldly at the chubby boy curled up in my arms, his face pale from the pain. Even at this moment, he was still swearing at me rudely. "Damn woman. What are you looking at? Hurry up and take me to the hospital. If you delay my treatment, I'll make Uncle Garrett beat you to death." He waved his fist as if he was about to hit me. However, I raised my foot and kicked him hard, sending him tumbling down the stairs. A pig-like scream rang out. Easton lay on his back on the stairs, hugging his leg and wailing. I stared at him expressionlessly, remembering the tragic ending of my previous life when I had my legs broken and was thrown out and frozen to death. I felt no ripple in my heart. I put laxative instead of rat poison in the steamed buns so that he could also experience the feeling I had before I died, lying alone in the ice and snow, gradually freezing until my whole body was stiff, and ending my life in extreme fear and cold. 6. Without hesitation, I got into a modified SUV. The warmth in the car instantly wrapped around me, and my frozen body gradually warmed up. Before the heavy snow blocked the road, I drove back to the villa I had already prepared. As soon as I came back, my daughter, Giselle, couldn't wait to rush up and hug me, clinging to my leg and refusing to let go. "Mom, why did you take so long to come back? I was so scared when you left me alone at home." Looking at the sincere concern on her face, my broken heart was filled again. I picked her up, kissed her little face, and solemnly promised, "Mom won't go out again. I'll stay here with Giselle." "Okay." My daughter nodded vigorously and danced happily. She ran around the room like the most carefree child in the world. In my previous life, she was beaten to the verge of death by her biological father. She watched helplessly as the food that originally belonged to us was given away by him. She was also forced to endure hunger and was humiliated by that beast, Easton, and finally died in pain. I didn't have the ability to protect her, and I regretted it until I died. I couldn't accept that my husband, who I had loved for more than 10 years, for the sake of his first love, pushed us to the brink of death and was even heartless enough to kill his own flesh and blood, just because Giselle was a girl. Now that I think about it, I realize that some men simply don't deserve to be fathers, but it doesn't matter. From now on, I will love my child even more and make up for the love she has missed. My Giselle. Mom will definitely do her best to protect you in this life and won't let you be hurt even a little bit. 7. In order to deceive Garrett and Haley, I had been eating coarse food with them for several days. I only dared to take out a few ham sausages to satisfy my hunger in the middle of the night. My daughter, Giselle, had also been eating instant food in the villa for several days and was already extremely hungry. I couldn't wait to cook the rice. I selected a piece of streaky pork with a good balance of fat and lean meat, took out the stew pot, and started making braised pork. I also stir-fried 2 vegetarian dishes and specially killed a crucian carp to make soup. Half an hour later, a steaming meal of 3 dishes and 1 soup was served on the table. My daughter buried her head in eating, with a happy smile on her face. Smelling the aroma of the food, I felt alive again. I quickly finished 2 bowls of rice and cleared the food on the table. After the meal, I found a lot of snacks and also made a small cake for my daughter. The sweet cream melted on my tongue, and the warm air blown by the comfortable constant temperature air conditioner made me feel relaxed. After eating and drinking my fill, I snuggled up with my daughter on the living room sofa to watch cartoons. There was a large basket of snacks and drinks beside me, and I ate without any scruples. At night, I turned on the surveillance equipment at home, and the scene inside shocked me. In the picture, Haley, who had been crying before, somehow had already rolled onto the bed with my husband. The two of them were having a passionate encounter and were completely carried away. They didn't notice at all that Easton was frozen like a popsicle on the stairs. 10 minutes later, they finally stopped panting. The woman gently traced circles on Garrett's chest with her finger, her tone a bit mocking. "Garrett, do you think that old and unattractive bitch won't really freeze to death outside in this icy and snowy weather?" My husband sneered. "I wish she would freeze to death outside. She's a woman with a ruined figure and a sallow face who can't even give birth to a son. I really regret marrying her." When the topic of sons came up, Haley finally showed some concern. "I wonder how Easton is doing in the hospital now. I'm really worried about him." Although she said so, she lay motionless in the man's arms and didn't want to go out and check at all. After all, what mattered most to her was herself. Otherwise, how could she have been so relieved to let me take Easton out to see a doctor alone? I had already eaten and drunk my fill, while the two of them were so hungry that they were dizzy. They rummaged through the cabinets looking for food. However, the large house was empty, and they couldn't even find half a pack of instant noodles. Helplessly, my husband took out his phone and begged the neighbors in the homeowners group for some food. However, his message disappeared without a trace. Nowadays, prices are skyrocketing, and every family is afraid that they won't have enough food to eat. How could they share it with others? He was so angry that his beard and eyes were twitching, and he cursed the neighbors for being heartless at home. Just then, his phone dinged. Messages about his salary card being maxed out popped up frantically, making his eyes turn red with anger. Looking at the words, "Balance is 0, in the text message reminder, after failing to call me several times, he couldn't hold back anymore. He threw his phone on the ground and cursed, "Isla, you damned bitch, you actually spent so much money behind my back. Do you want to die?" After venting his anger, he slumped to the ground, hugging his growling stomach. Finally, Haley took out her savings and offered a high price of 10,000 yuan in the homeowners group to barely exchange for a small bag of expired bread. The two of them managed to finish the meal with some rotten vegetable leaves. I lay comfortably on the sofa, drinking hot red wine, eating pizza, and watching them with pale faces gnawing on the unpalatable and moldy bread. I felt extremely satisfied. 8. At noon the next day, when I leisurely cooked a delicious meal for my daughter and myself and slowly sipped milk, Haley's call came in again. My husband's voice was obviously much weaker, but when he heard the sound of me gulping down milk, he immediately raised his voice. "Isla, where are you? I'm almost starving to death at home, and you're out here feasting and having a good time behind my back. Do you want to die?" I couldn't help but burst out laughing. I made a video call to the other side and showed them the abalone, crayfish, skewers, fruit platter, a large cup of milk tea, and the steaming hot pot bubbling on the table in front of me. I deliberately showed them from all angles so that they could clearly see what I was eating. Both of them let out sharp screams and wished they could pounce on the screen immediately. "Damn woman, where are you? Are you enjoying yourself behind my back? Where the hell did you go and how did you get so much delicious food? Send me some right away, right now." In the weather of over -100 degrees Celsius outside, I leisurely poured oysters, steaks, and sliced leopard coral groupers into the hot pot one by one. I ignored them and put pieces of meat slices covered in soup into my mouth, letting out a sigh of great enjoyment, shaking the fresh fruit juice in my hand. I turned my head to meet the 2 pairs of eyes that were glowing green with hunger. "Do you want to eat, huh?" They both nodded vigorously, nodding like pounding garlic. I said indifferently, you two cheated on me behind my back, and you still want me to risk my life to bring you food. Do you think I'm stupid? My husband's face changed. He was just about to get angry when he saw that I was about to hang up the phone, afraid that I would really ignore him. He, who was always arrogant, knelt down on the ground with a thud and begged me, crying, wife, I was wrong. I was just bewitched for a moment and was seduced by this bitch. Please forgive me, I beg you, bring me some food. I'm cold and hungry now. We've been married for more than 10 years, and our relationship. Hearing him say this, Haley's eyes widened like copper bells. She angrily cursed. Are you a man? Do you dare to do it but not admit it? The next second, Garrett frantically winked at her, indicating that he was acting, but Haley didn't care and demanded, where's my son, Easton? What did you do with him? Let him come out and see me now. I waved my hand and said, your son is probably frozen to death outside by now. He was shouting so loudly that day. Didn't you hear him? A trace of uneasiness flashed across Haley's face. Of course, she couldn't have heard him because at that time, she had already been having an intimate encounter with Garrett in bed. Her face showed fear. She suddenly opened the door and saw Easton, who was frozen like a popsicle. The woman's shrill scream rang out over the phone. Haley completely broke down. She rushed over like a madwoman and cried heart-wrenchingly, son, what's wrong with you? Don't scare Mom, you damned woman. How could you be so heartless? He's just a child. I looked at her expressionlessly and felt no emotion in my heart. In my previous life, when my daughter was killed, she was even younger than that beast, Easton. At that time, why didn't she think that Giselle was also a child? They deserved all of this. 9. After seeing Easton's body with his own eyes, my husband unexpectedly calmed down. He finally realized that I was no longer the cowardly Isla I used to be and wouldn't let him manipulate me anymore. Gritting his teeth, he started crying and apologizing to me, but I wasn't falling for it. I crossed my legs and showed a playful smile, saying, okay, you go and beat your dear sister. The harder you hit her, the happier I'll be. If I'm in a good mood, I'll consider bringing you some food. As soon as I finished speaking, Haley rushed up and started cursing at me, as if she wanted to vent all her grievances on me. Hearing that he had to beat the first love he had been thinking about for years, my husband's eyes flashed with hesitation and entanglement. He looked pained and remorseful. Isla, how could you become so vicious? Even if you hate Haley in your heart, you can't come up with such a cruel way to punish her. Are you still human? I didn't answer. I just raised my phone and showed him the cabinet full of reserve food behind me. My husband clearly swallowed his saliva and was swayed. I took the opportunity to provoke him. Since in your heart, Haley is more important than your life, I won't force you to hit her. That's it, I'm hanging up. My husband panicked completely. He quickly stopped me. Don't hang up, I'll do as you say. Okay, Garrett. Are you crazy? Haley's eyes widened in disbelief, and fear and disappointment appeared in her eyes. She couldn't believe that the man who had always been obedient and attentive to her was now going to hit her for the sake of food. The next second, the beatings that were inflicted on me in my previous life were all returned to Haley. In order to survive, my husband exerted all his strength. He grabbed her by the hair and slapped her face one after another fiercely. Her face swelled up instantly, with blood at the corner of her mouth, looking extremely miserable. Seeing that I didn't call to stop him, my husband became even more ruthless. His eyes turned red from the beating. He raised his foot and kicked the woman's stomach hard, ignoring the shrill screams in his ears. He actually crushed Haley's ankle bone. Only when the clear sound of bones breaking echoed did I finally show a smile. Haley was beaten to the point of being on the verge of death. She lay on the ground like a dead dog, unable to even cry out in pain, and fainted from the intense pain directly. My husband smiled obsequiously and rubbed his hands, saying, "Are you satisfied with this?" I nodded and pretended to be in a difficult situation, saying, "You did a good job, but now the road is blocked by heavy snow outside. I really can't do anything about it." My husband's face changed, and he finally realized that he had been tricked by me. He gritted his teeth in anger, with the veins on his forehead bulging. He roared like a madman, "Isla, you bitch, you clearly promised that as long as I beat her, you would bring us food. How could you go back on your word?" I didn't care and said, "So what, when you kicked me out of the house? Why didn't you think that I might die outside? Moreover, I'm just giving back to you exactly what you did to me in the past, before I died in my previous life." I knelt in front of the door of our house and kowtowed to them again and again, begging them to save my dying daughter. I kowtowed until my head was bleeding, saying, "I'm begging you, Giselle is your own daughter. How can you have the heart to let her freeze to death? It doesn't matter if I die. I'm begging you to let Giselle in. She's only 8 years old. How can she bear it in this icy and snowy weather?" But he shook off my hand violently, looking disgusted as if he had touched garbage. "The loser you gave birth to as a bitch is just a waste of food even if she's alive. It's better to save the food for my Haley. I've wanted to divorce you for a long time. If it weren't for the inheritance left by your parents, I wouldn't have endured you for so long. Isla, take your little wretch and go die quickly." He took away all the remaining food. Extinguishing all hope of survival, I held my daughter and curled up in the ice and snow, and was frozen to death. The bone-chilling cold that I felt before I died in my previous life returned. I couldn't stop shivering all over my body. I listened expressionlessly to his hoarse accusations and curses. I hung up the phone without hesitation. Blood debts must be paid in blood. It's only natural. This is the evil you've done. And you deserve everything that happens to you. 10. The temperature was getting lower and lower, and the food was almost gone. During the day, the community was always quiet, as if it were a deserted land with no one living there. At night, there were always successive screams and sounds of fighting. Some people became executioners who killed others at night. Throwing objects from high-rise buildings in the community was not uncommon, and with a little attention, you would find that it wasn't just objects being thrown from the high-rise buildings, but sometimes people as well. In the apocalypse, the human heart is the most vulnerable thing to be tested. Morality and the legal system could no longer restrain the people who were driven crazy by hunger at this moment. I once again felt lucky that the safe house I had chosen was surrounded by few people and was adjacent to a military camp. At least, I didn't have to worry about my personal safety. On the 15th day of the extreme low temperature, the two of them hadn't eaten for 3 days. Haley, who had witnessed her son's body with her own eyes, had now completely gone crazy. She lay on the ground, constantly cursing my husband and me. She said all the most unpleasant words and howled hoarsely. My husband was extremely annoyed. At first, he pretended to comfort her out of old feelings, but later he simply stopped pretending. He actually wanted to throw Haley off the balcony, which was 5 floors high. "Garrett, you beast. I must have been blind to have fallen for you. How could you treat me like this?" The woman was in a crazy state, clinging tightly to the man's arm, with deep hatred in her eyes. Half of her body was pushed out of the balcony, and the biting cold wind beneath her feet made her shiver all over. The strong will to survive made her eyes bloodshot, and she held on to my husband tightly and didn't dare to let go. My husband was delirious from hunger and said expressionlessly, "You can't even walk, and you can't go out to find food for me. What's the use of keeping you? Why don't you go and be reunited with your dead son underground?" As soon as he finished speaking, he unhesitatingly shook off the woman's hand and pushed her straight off the balcony. After the woman's pig-like screams, there was a loud thud, and she completely fell silent. I closed my eyes and turned off the surveillance video. 11. When I turned on the surveillance again, I saw my emaciated husband squatting on the ground, eating the leather sofa. He was already delirious from hunger, since he had killed his so-called white moonlight, the woman he had always cherished in his heart, with his own hands. He had been suffering from insomnia all night long, sitting blankly in the room with his scarlet eyes open. Sometimes when he went crazy, he would hit the wall hard with his head and let out inhuman howls from his mouth. I was terrified when I saw this and knew that he had completely lost his mind. My daughter beside me threw herself into my arms. Over the past month or so, I had raised her to be plump and healthy. When she ran, the flesh on her cheeks would jiggle a few times. She also smiled more often. Her personality had gradually become more outgoing from being timid and shy at the beginning. Usually, she would thoughtfully help me with the housework. The son of the white moonlight spat on my daughter's face and showed off proudly. "Uncle Garrett said that you're just a loser. You should have been drowned in the toilet when you were born. Women are born to serve men, and you're as cheap as your mother." She just lowered her head and played with the toy in her hand, saying softly, "Daddy doesn't like me and Mommy, so I don't like Daddy either. No matter where he goes, I only need Mommy." She was wearing a beautiful princess dress, with a naive and happy smile on her face. She was no longer the pitiful look in her previous life when she was so hungry that her cheeks were sunken and she was on the verge of death. It's hard for me to describe the moment of being moved in words. I just felt that all the previous regrets had been made up for, and my heart was filled. In the next 3 months, I stayed with my daughter in the villa safely and steadily, and every day was pleasant and leisurely. Until the 4th month, the surface temperature began to warm up, the thick layer of snow gradually melted, and the outside world regained its vitality and vigor. Because it was close to the military camp, my daughter and I became among the first batch of people to be rescued. There was still a lot of food left in the villa. I only kept the amount that was basically needed for my daughter and me to survive, and donated the rest so that they could help other people in need. When the police called me to claim my husband's body, I went immediately. I agreed to cremate him on the spot and didn't even give him an extra glance. My expressionless look made the words of comfort from the staff get stuck in their throats. My husband was dead, and his house naturally fell to me. I sorted out the remaining money in my hand. After spending more than 4 million yuan on supplies, there was still about 1 million yuan in cash left, counting the house worth 4 million yuan. Even if I didn't go out to work, I could support my daughter independently. Later, because of the large amount of food I donated, which helped many people in the urban area, I was also recognized as an outstanding citizen by the government. On the day I came out after receiving the award, I held my daughter and looked at the clear blue sky. The last trace of darkness in my heart was also dispelled. Every day from now on will be a good day. Story 2. I turned off the video call with my mother-in-law and blocked her. Then I received a flood of messages from my husband and father-in-law, filled with all kinds of abusive words that were unbearable to read. I sneered and blocked them as well. They're on the verge of death, yet they still want to take their anger out on me. I opened the trending searches, and the top news was that the international hotel in City A had fallen. I watched the live footage from the drone, which just happened to capture a guest room being broken into by zombies. Those 3 familiar and detestable figures were surrounded and bitten by the zombies, and they fell out of the window. I felt a great sense of relief in my heart. In the last life, you caused my daughter to die a tragic death at the hands of zombies. Now it's time for you to taste the bitter fruit you sowed in the previous life. 01, the first day. I stared blankly at the date on my phone, unable to believe that I had been reborn. 7 days later, the zombie virus would break out, and the cities would fall one after another. Fortunately, in the last life, I had prepared some supplies in advance, and my family managed to hold out for a while. My husband, Xander, my father-in-law, Bo, and my mother-in-law, Vaughn, took it for granted to eat the food I had stocked up. They completely forgot how they had scolded me for being wasteful before. They said that I only knew how to spend money, bought things randomly, and called me a loser who couldn't make money. But I used my own salary to stock up on supplies. I carried bags of grains, oils, rice, and noodles up the stairs one by one. I didn't do this for them, but for my sweet and sensible daughter, Jasmine. I had no support from my natal family and suffered a lot of grievances in my husband's family. My daughter was the only hope for me to live in this world. I thought that my daughter was in a period of rapid growth. In case of an epidemic outbreak and lockdown, my daughter's nutrition might not be sufficient. So when I heard the news of the spread of a new virus, I prepared some supplies in advance. 02, but no one expected it to be a terrifying zombie virus. At that time, I was used to being submissive and didn't dare to resist when they took over my supplies. Even when my daughter wanted to eat a small cookie, Vaughn snatched it away. I originally thought that as long as I endured in silence and waited until the rescue arrived, everything would be okay. I had been married into this family for 5 years, and I knew that they had always disliked me. Xander disliked my low education level and that I hadn't given birth to a son to carry on the family line. Vaughn and Bo disliked that I had only given birth to a daughter and thought of me as an outsider. But I never expected that they could be so vicious. One morning, I woke up from hunger and found that my daughter was gone. They told me that my daughter had run out of the house by herself in the middle of the night and was dragged away by the zombies in the corridor. I went crazy trying to go out and look for her. But Xander slapped me to the ground and said viciously, "If you run out now, you're going to get our whole family killed." Vaughn also stood by with her hands on her hips and chimed in, "A girl is gone. So what, just have a son next time." I don't know if it was because of hunger or the beating, but I felt completely drained of strength, and my mind went blank. I only felt that the world was completely dark. I sat there for a whole day without eating or drinking, just staring blankly at my daughter's photo. On the day I gave birth, when Xander saw that the nurse had brought out a daughter, he left without looking back and even posted a message on his social media. "What bad luck, it's a daughter. I can't stand staying in this hospital for another minute." Vaughn even left me alone in the hospital and didn't take care of me during my confinement at all. 03, late at night, I looked up at the window. The boundless darkness made the moon look poignant and lonely, and the terrifying roars echoed again and again in the empty street. I somehow found myself walking into Vaughn's room and quietly took her phone. Since it was an old-fashioned mobile phone, there was no lock screen. With a gentle swipe, I saw the Instagram chat interface that hadn't been closed yet. Family of 3, the number 3 was very eye-catching. Vaughn, thanks to these zombies, that little loser is finally gone. Xander, I didn't want that girl anyway. I wasted a whole day's effort in the hospital back then, and I didn't even bother to give her a name. Xander, I had been looking forward to it for 10 months, and all I got was a little loser. What bad luck, Bo, she always has such a gloomy face. It's really annoying to look at. Vaughn, we should have thrown her and that little loser out together last night. Xander, Mom, don't worry, now the network is back on, and I've received the news that the country has developed a zombie vaccine, and the army will come to rescue us soon. Xander, when this loser gives birth to a son in the future, I'll make her leave the house with nothing. 04, looking at these cold words, I bit my lip tightly and trembled all over. I had been so obedient and submissive. So why couldn't they leave my daughter alone? Even tigers don't eat their cubs. They're worse than animals, these scumbags. I will make them pay with their lives. I opened the door and saw a teddy bear covered in blood lying alone at the door. There was also a small pink shoe, also covered in blood. Several zombies were chewing on something in the corridor. At this moment, I couldn't control my emotions anymore. I roared at them. The roar attracted countless zombies. They rushed into the door one after another. Xander and Bo, who were awakened, stared at me in horror and rushed towards me, trying to close the door. Vaughn collapsed on the ground, and her pants were wet, but it was too late. Unfortunately, I was the first to be submerged in the tide of zombies. I didn't get to see them being torn apart with my own eyes. I held the small pink shoe tightly, and my consciousness gradually faded away in the pain. I was so unwilling. If I could have another life, I would definitely protect my daughter well and never let her be hurt again. 05, I looked at my daughter's lovely sleeping face beside me and wiped away my tears. Vaughn, as usual, pushed the door open without knocking and shouted meanly, "What time is it? Why haven't you gotten up to cook yet? You're sleeping like a pig." I spent 200,000 yuan on the betrothal gift to marry such a lazy and good-for-nothing loser like you. I didn't respond to her. Instead, I stared at her with red eyes. I really wanted to tear her apart right then and there. Vaughn was startled by my appearance and shivered. Then she cursed again. "Why are you crying so early in the morning? So annoying." Then she slammed the door shut and left, cursing. "Mommy." My daughter beside me woke up at some point and called me timidly. The clear and tender voice of the child made me sober up a bit. I hugged her tightly and said, "Baby, Mommy is here." My daughter nestled into my arms, and I sighed. There were still 7 days left until the zombie outbreak, and it was still a society ruled by law. I couldn't act impulsively without considering the consequences. 06, I was just an ordinary clerk with a monthly salary of 3,000 yuan. I didn't have much savings, nor did I have any extra property. If I didn't have enough money, I would still have to share the same house with them on the day the apocalypse came. Just when I was at a loss, I happened to see a lottery shop in front of me. I suddenly remembered a post I had seen on a forum after the zombie outbreak in the last life. The person who posted said that he had just won the lottery for a little over a week, and before he could spend much of the money, the end of the world came. I just happened to remember the lottery numbers he had shown in the post. The lottery draw date was also tonight, so I immediately ran to the lottery shop and bought a ticket with the exact same numbers. I suppressed my excitement and returned home as usual. While they were sitting on the sofa, munching on melon seeds and laughing heartily while watching TV, I silently swept the floor, mopped the floor, did the laundry, and cooked, as usual. After cleaning up their leftovers, I silently washed the dishes in the kitchen. Finally, it was 8 o'clock. I took out my phone and checked the winning numbers. Sure enough, they were exactly the same. This also meant that what happened in the last life had indeed taken place. 07, the next day, after sending my daughter to kindergarten, I asked for leave from the company. I disguised myself and went to the lottery center to claim the 10 million yuan prize. After deducting the tax, I deposited the remaining 8 million yuan into a new card. I held the bank card excitedly and thought about how to plan this money. In my memory of the last life, the the zombie virus wouldn't infect animals or plants, only those who were bitten by zombies would be infected, and the zombies were just ordinary walking corpses without much destructive power. However, if there were too many zombies, ordinary obstacles could easily be destroyed. The official news also reminded that as long as one didn't make too much noise, they wouldn't attract the zombies to gather. Moreover, before I died in the last life, the zombie vaccine had already been developed, and the army would come to the rescue. I believed in the power of the country, which would surely be able to rebuild social order and restore people's normal lives. I had to find a way for my daughter and myself to spend these 3 months safely and comfortably. At present, the first thing I needed to do was to find a suitable place to live. It had to be a place where we could safely survive the zombie crisis and also meet our future living needs. Fortunately, I lived in an ordinary small city, and the housing prices were not very expensive. The housing prices in ordinary residential areas were relatively cheap, but they were too easy to fall during the zombie outbreak. Even if the zombies couldn't break through the doors of the houses, the corridors and elevators would be filled with zombies, even if there were airdropped supplies. Many residents wouldn't be able to go out to find supplies once their own supplies were exhausted. However, high-end residential areas had sturdy gates and walls, which could isolate the zombies outside the community. Even if there were zombies inside, the security forces could easily eliminate them. I remembered that in the last life, some wealthy people in high-end residential areas even had the mood to post Versailles-style videos on social media during the apocalypse. There was a beautifully dressed noblewoman who led her pet dog and slowly went downstairs to get the supplies. She even complained that she could only eat ordinary beef now and couldn't get the air-flown seafood. At that time, many people couldn't even get a single strand of noodles. I could only sigh that the rich and the poor really had different fates. Even in the apocalypse, the wealthy and powerful could live more comfortably than ordinary people, while the poor could only leave their lives to fate. 08. I took the 8 million yuan and went to the sales office of a nearby high-end residential area. The sales office was in an independent building at the entrance of the community, and the decoration was very grand. Perhaps because I was dressed plainly and didn't drive there, the several salesgirls in the reception hall were not very enthusiastic and didn't immediately receive me when I entered. It was not until I walked up to them that one of the salesgirls asked perfunctorily, "Madam, are you here to buy a house? The housing prices here are very expensive." I ignored her rudeness and directly asked, "Is there a fully furnished ready-to-move-in house available? The higher the floor, the better." Another salesgirl secretly rolled her eyes and impatiently flicked her hair, saying, "Currently, there is a penthouse duplex with a terrace. It's a one-elevator one-house unit. 200 square meters. It has a children's room, a study, a utility room, and a master bedroom with a walk-in closet. But the down payment for this house is 1 million yuan. When I heard about the master bedroom with a walk-in closet, I was a bit tempted. Whether in my natal family or my current husband's family, I had never been able to have a room of my own. In my natal family's house, the only secondary bedroom was given to my brother, and I could only sleep on a small bed placed in the corner of the living room. The only thing that separated me from the rest of the room was a curtain. In my husband's family, I had to endure the loud snoring and could hardly fall asleep every day. I had always longed to be like those favored girls, having a beautiful walk-in closet, a magnificent dressing table, and a bright and spacious bedroom. I also wanted to give my daughter a dreamy princess room so that she could have a carefree childhood. In order to avoid a series of troubles such as loan procedures or having to pay off the mortgage to the bank after the social order was restored, I turned to the supervisor and said, "I want the penthouse duplex with a terrace. I'll pay in full." Also, the attitudes of those salesgirls just now were a bit inappropriate. I want to change to another salesperson to sign the contract. The supervisor immediately smiled apologetically and said, "We're very sorry. It's our fault for not providing good service. I'll arrange it for you right away." Then he loudly scolded the salesgirls whose faces had turned pale. "Hurry up and apologize to the customer." I didn't want to waste time dealing with this matter. I readily signed the contract with another salesperson, and the new salesperson led me to see my new house with a beaming smile. 09. I held the key to my new house and walked towards the house with the best location. Then I saw that familiar face at the gate downstairs, the person who had appeared in my dreams countless times. I instinctively wanted to run away, but a hand grabbed me. "Is that you, Delilah?" That voice was still as deep and gentle as before. With a hint of trembling, I held back my tears and let out a soft and slowly turned my head. He was wearing a neat suit, and his figure looked tall and slender. His face was as sharply contoured as if carved, and compared to the sunny and cheerful young man in my memory, he had a more determined edge. He was my first love, Bennett, the regret that I could never have. Compared to him, I felt a bit embarrassed. The shiny glass reflected my somewhat haggard face. I didn't know what to say, so I could only lower my head silently. "I've been looking for you." His voice was a bit choked, in fact. I knew that, but I had always avoided his contact. I didn't have the courage to look into his eyes, just like I didn't have the courage to face my parents' coercion back then. At that time, we were both very poor. My parents beat him out of the house with a stick because he couldn't afford the betrothal gift that satisfied them at that time. They threatened me with death, saying that if I went with him, they would kill him and then drag me down to jump with them. I could only stay in the house and listen to his desperate knocking on the door until it disappeared. I could only cry and send him a breakup text message, blocking all his contact information, in order to buy a house for my good-for-nothing brother. They needed a betrothal gift of 200,000 yuan. Since I was somewhat good-looking, my current husband's family bought me with this 200,000 yuan betrothal gift. I didn't even ask my parents who the other party was, since it wasn't him. I didn't care who I married. From then on, there was no more light in my life, and I thought that this was how my life would be. Later, my daughter was born, and I had another reason to live, until the zombie crisis broke out, and they killed my daughter. In the last life, I died together with them, and I never got to see my first love again before I died. Perhaps I was too miserable in the last life. Or perhaps God took pity on me and wanted to compensate me, so I met him again after being reborn. 11. I'm already married and have a daughter. My voice was a bit hoarse. He was stunned for a moment, and his eyes were filled with redness. "I'm sorry, it was my fault back then. I was useless." He gently hugged me into his arms. "Now I have money." All the grievances burst out at that moment, and I couldn't hold back anymore. I hugged him and burst into tears. I know this sounds absurd, but all of this is true. I still remember the excruciating pain of being bitten by the zombies clearly. It was like my heart was being torn apart. I originally didn't want to tell anyone that I had been reborn. I just wanted to live a peaceful life with my daughter, but I was afraid that he would also suffer that kind of pain. He was silent for a long time, and his eyes were bloodshot. After a while, he finally spoke and said, "I'm sorry," to me again. "It's all my fault. I should have taken you away back then." He told me that because of that incident. He had gone to a foreign place alone to develop, hoping to earn enough money and then come back to find me. But when he came back, my family was no longer there. He tried all kinds of ways to contact me, but there was no response. I was crying so hard that I could barely breathe. I managed to stop my tears and murmured, "So many years have passed. You must be married by now, right? It's not the time to be sentimental now. You also need to make some preparations to take good care of your wife and children." He was stunned, and then said in a muffled voice, "I'm still single." I was speechless. I didn't want to look into his eyes and made an excuse to pick up my daughter and fled from there. I spent another night as usual. I forced myself not to think too much. I told myself that there were still many things to prepare and fell asleep amidst a jumble of thoughts. 12. The third day. I summoned up my courage and walked into that community, praying that I wouldn't meet him today. I looked around nervously and almost got caught by the security guards as a suspicious person and questioned. It was only when I showed my door key that the security guards apologized. I made sure that the person wasn't around and then walked to the elevator door. I started to study how to use the elevator card. I was still looking down at the magnetic card in my hand when a slightly cold hand swept past my ear and pointed at the elevator's sensing area. A clear and cold voice came from above my head. "Swipe it here." The voice was accompanied by warm breath that blew on my hair, making the top of my head itch. The place where my earlobe was touched felt a bit hot. I obediently followed his words. It was only when the elevator door closed that I realized what had happened. He clearly wasn't there just now. When did he come in? I looked at my ears, which were as red as blood. In the elevator mirror, my gaze moved upward and just met his eyes. He spoke first. "You ran away pretty fast yesterday." I didn't dare to answer. The elevator arrived at the top floor very quickly. I immediately flashed inside, and he followed me in. I was speechless and said somewhat pithily, "Bennett, don't you know that the end of the world is coming soon? Why aren't you stockpiling supplies, Delilah?" He wasn't willing to back down either, although I was the first to call him by his full name. I didn't know why, but when I heard him call me by my full name, I felt extremely wronged. We stared at each other at the door, neither of us paying attention to the other. It was as if we had gone back to the past. When we occasionally had conflicts, we were like this, but in the end, it was always him who gave in first and then patiently coaxed me until he made me laugh. After a while, I heard him sigh and say seriously, "Delilah, I'm a man, how do I know anything about stockpiling supplies? You have more experience than me, so you have to teach me." I was even more speechless, but I also felt a little disappointed. I thought what he said made sense, seeing that I was a bit relaxed. He pushed his luck even further. "Do you have a car?" "No." "Then can you drive?" "I'll buy my own car and get my own driver's license. It's only a few days left." "Are you some kind of prodigy who can learn to drive in a few days?" "I want to stockpile supplies." "What does that have to do with driving?" "If you don't drive, are you going to carry the supplies back one by taking the bus?" "Then I'll call a Didi." "Okay, then I'll register for a Didi account. Then I'll order takeout." "Wait a moment, after I register for a Didi account, I'll also register as a Meituan delivery rider." "All done." "So, Delilah, do you want to call a Didi, order takeout, or take my car?" I couldn't help but be by him. Humph. A free laborer, it would be a waste not to use him. 13. He drove a black sedan and stopped in front of me. I recognized the logo on the front of the car. It was a Mercedes-Benz. He opened the car door and walked over, casually saying, "I bought it outright. There's no car loan." After a pause, he added, "And there's no mortgage either." I didn't want to pay attention to him and walked straight to the back seat and opened the car door. A hand stopped my action. He opened the door of the passenger seat and said, "Sit in the front. Leave the passenger seat for your future wife." It's not appropriate for me to sit there. This time, it was his turn to be speechless. He pulled me into the passenger seat despite my opposition and said, "Sit in the front, it's easier to talk." After that, he even helped me fasten my seatbelt. When he got close to me, there was a faint scent of cologne on him, which smelled very good. I have to say that the interior of this car was spacious. The soft leather sofa fit snugly against my back. And it was very comfortable. After the zombie crisis is over, I'll also get a car like this. 14. The two of us went to a large shopping mall. After getting out of the car, we went straight to the supermarket. I suggested that we split up and he buy his supplies while I buy mine, but he unilaterally vetoed it. He said that he would buy whatever I bought and just get 2 portions. I couldn't persuade him, so I pushed the shopping cart in my hand towards him. He naturally took it and pushed the cart behind me. My plan was to prepare supplies for half a year at once. Although the zombie vaccine would be developed in 3 months, it was better to stockpile more just in case. That's what I thought, but when I saw the dazzling array of goods, I was overwhelmed and didn't know where to start choosing. He and I walked around aimlessly, like a couple of old married people taking a stroll. I walked in front and whenever I saw something I wanted to eat, I would take 2 portions and throw them into the shopping cart. He pushed the increasingly full shopping cart and walked behind me. When we reached the snack section, he picked up a bar of Dove chocolate and said, "Do you want to get more of this? I remember you used to like it." I looked at the chocolate in his hand and was immediately lost in memories. During the time we were together, because we were poor, we would occasionally buy a snack and share it when we wanted to eat something. After I finished my portion, I would look at his portion longingly. Every time he saw me like that, he would pretend to frown and say, "This doesn't suit my taste, baby, help me eat it." Then he would stuff his portion into my hand and let me eat it all. Thinking of this, my nose twitched. When he saw that I wasn't feeling well, he asked me nervously if I was feeling unwell. I shook my head and wiped away a tear, saying, "I suddenly feel like crying when I think about the last period of my previous life when I only ate plain noodles and nothing else." In the early days of the zombie virus outbreak in the previous life, we could still eat some fresh vegetables. Later, as the supplies gradually decreased, Vaughn, using the excuse that the elderly couldn't be hungry and the head of the family couldn't be weak, only allowed my daughter and me to eat plain noodles, while they had meat and oil in every meal. One night, I was so hungry that I opened the refrigerator and saw the last bag of dumplings left. I thought I would cook them and share them the next day, but when I woke up, I only saw the empty packaging bag on the kitchen floor. Then I saw 3 figures on the balcony secretly eating something. I was so heartbroken, but I didn't dare to say anything and could only endure it silently. 15. By the time the shopping cart was full, we had been wandering around for over an hour. The supplies we had selected were far from the planned quantity. If we transported them back and forth like this, we wouldn't be able to buy all the supplies before the zombie virus outbreak. so we decided to give up this inefficient way and directly found the supermarket manager and made a list: 30 bags of rice, 30 bags of flour, 30 barrels of cooking oil, 1 box each of salt, sugar, vinegar, soy sauce, and other seasonings, 20 boxes of instant noodles, 20 boxes of self-heating rice, 20 boxes of self-heating hot pots, 100 bags each of biscuits, potato chips, chocolate, bread, nuts, dried meat, and fruit candies, 30 boxes of mineral water, 10 boxes of Coke, 10 boxes of Sprite, 10 boxes of juice, 30 boxes of toothpaste, 30 boxes of soap, 20 bottles of shower gel, 20 bottles of shampoo, 10 bottles of dishwashing liquid, 10 bottles of laundry detergent, 20 bottles of disinfectant, 50 gin of beef, 50 gin of pork, 30 gin of fish and shrimp, 30 chickens and ducks, 20 bags each of frozen dumplings, frozen buns, and frozen scallion pancakes. Ordering so many things at once inevitably made people suspicious. The supermarket manager required us to pay the full amount of the order in advance. We made some excuses, explaining that the company was going to hold an activity for employees and distribute benefits, and asked him to order 2 large freezers in the electrical appliances section and have them delivered to our house together. We also promised to give him a tip later. Seeing that we settled all the payments on the spot, the supermarket manager didn't say anything more and told us that the goods could be delivered to our house in the afternoon. I gave Bennett a key to my house and told him that I had something very important to deal with and asked him to move my share of the supplies to the storage room of the house. I also said that I would transfer half of the money to him later. He didn't ask too many questions and took the key, saying, "Delilah, no matter what you're going to do, I will support you." 16. I went to a travel agency and bought 3 travel vouchers for City A. Then I posted a Instagram moments that was only visible to those 3 people. "I'm so lucky, I won 3 travel vouchers in a lottery. I can take my baby to City A tomorrow, during dinner." The 3 of them winked at each other at the dining table and were calculating in their hearts. Vaughn desperately winked at me, but I pretended not to see and picked up some food for my daughter. Seeing that I didn't respond, Vaughn looked angrily at Xander. Xander coughed and said, "Delilah, give me your travel vouchers. I'll take our parents out for a trip." I knew that with their selfish and thick-skinned nature, they would definitely be tempted by these 3 travel vouchers, of course. I wasn't so kind as to really let them go on a trip. I knew that Vaughn's birthday was in 10 days. In the previous life, Xander, that mama's boy, had originally planned to take annual leave and go on a family trip. Of course, he only planned to take his parents and didn't plan to take me and my daughter, the 2 outsiders. I deliberately pretended to be in a difficult situation and said, "But Jasmine has never been on a long trip before. This is a rare opportunity to win the lottery. And I want to take her out for a trip." Xander raised his voice and his expression became impatient. "What do you mean by, but, our mom's going to be 50 soon. What's wrong with you using the travel vouchers to show your filial piety to her?" It was really ridiculous. How could he ask for my travel vouchers in the name of being filial to his mom? "You've been married into our family for several years and haven't given birth to a son. You just want to enjoy yourself all day long." Bo also added fuel to the fire. Vaughn angrily threw down her chopsticks, and the wrinkles on her face almost squeezed her facial features together. "As a daughter-in-law, you don't show filial piety to your in-laws. My son works so hard to support the family and only has a few days of rest. You don't know how to be considerate either." I watched the 3 of them singing in unison and didn't want to play along with them anymore. I put the travel vouchers on the table. Vaughn took the travel vouchers triumphantly and said, "My son is still filial. After all, an outsider can't be counted on. Mom, let Delilah pack our luggage. We'll set off tomorrow. I'll definitely throw you a grand 50th birthday party." I sneered in my heart, "A 50th birthday? I'll make you die at 49. After packing their going on a trip luggage, I secretly put a little gift in the suitcase. 17. The 4th day, early in the morning, they dragged their suitcases and went out. After sending my daughter to kindergarten, I went back home to pack some personal belongings and some documents, and then immediately rushed to my new house. From today on, I could live in the new house with my daughter without any scruples. I wasn't worried at all that those 3 scumbags would contact me. They would even hide from me when they ate something good, let alone share any travel experiences with me, without them getting in the way. It was more convenient for me to prepare the new house. The decoration of the new house was in a light luxury style, and the furniture and electrical appliances were all very complete. there was a flower bed on the terrace, and I planned to grow some vegetables there because fresh vegetables couldn't be stored for a long time. I went to the storage room to check the supplies from yesterday and was surprised to find that Bennett hadn't taken his half of the supplies, just as I was wondering. The door of the entrance hall was opened, and Bennett dragged his suitcase in. I crossed my arms and gave him a look that said, "What are you doing?" He said without blushing, "I'm scared to live alone." He also said that he had improved his cooking skills after being single for many years and had actively exercised and practiced Sanda in his spare time. He could not only be presentable in social situations but also cook well, with a driver and laborer already, and now a free cook and bodyguard. I might as well make use of him, given the urgent time. After checking the new house, Bennett and I went out. We first found a construction team and gave them a generous reward to replace the door of the new house with a bank vault-level anti-theft door, the kind that couldn't be blown up by a bomb. Within the day, the other windows were also replaced with bulletproof materials and double reinforced. We installed a water circulation device and a solar power supply system on the terrace to prevent water and power outages, and also installed protective nets around it. We also gave the foreman an extra sum of money and asked him to replace the security doors of the fire escapes on my floor and the floor below with anti-theft doors. Since Bennett's house was just below mine, we didn't have to worry about other homeowners coming to our door before the construction team left. I ordered several very sturdy locks from them and asked them to deliver them as soon as possible. After everything was ready, Bennett and I went out for the second purchase. This time, the purchase was mainly for some clothes, bedding, and other items. I walked in front, and whenever I saw something suitable, I directly asked the clerk to pack it without looking at the price. Bennett followed behind, carrying full shopping bags and swiping his card to pay. People who didn't know might think that I was a mistress being supported by a wealthy boss. In addition, I also bought a lot of children's books and toys. Although the zombie crisis was coming, my child's education couldn't be neglected. After that, we also went to the pharmacy and bought a batch of medicines, including all kinds, anti-inflammatory drugs, cold medicines, stomach medicines, vitamins. We only stopped when the trunk, back seat, and passenger seat of the Mercedes-Benz were all filled with things. Since there was no room for people to sit, Bennett had to drive back first, and I went to pick up my daughter from kindergarten alone. When I arrived at the kindergarten, Jasmine had already packed her things and was sitting quietly on the chair waiting for me, because she had been neglected by her biological father, grandparents since she was a child. She was more well-behaved and sensible than children of the same age. When Jasmine saw me coming, she ran towards me happily and said, "Mommy, baby, be good. How was your performance in kindergarten today?" Jasmine was rewarded with a little red flower by the teacher. "Look, Mommy, Jasmine is so great. Mommy has prepared a gift for you as a reward today." "Thank you, Mommy. No matter what gift Mommy prepares, Jasmine will like it." Jasmine looked at me with her big eyes full of anticipation. Thinking of the scene in the previous life where such a lovely daughter was thrown out to be eaten by zombies, my heart ached. These three scumbags, I won't let them have a good time for long. After all, in the previous life, City A was the first city to fall during the zombie crisis and was also the city with the most serious situation. 18. When we got back to the new house, as soon as we entered, we could smell the aroma of the food. Bennett, wearing an apron, was coming out of the kitchen with a plate of braised pork. I was a bit stunned and forgot to explain the situation to my daughter. My daughter looked at Bennett curiously and then at me. "Jasmine, this is our new home, and this person is, hello, Jasmine, I'm Bennett's father, the nanny your mother hired. I'll be living with you from now on. Please take care of me," Bennett answered confidently before I could find the right words. And he even winked at me. Humph. A man's words can't be trusted. "Hello, Bennett's father, the braised pork you made smells so delicious." Jasmine, a little glutton, was attracted by the smell and broke free from my hand to join the enemy. I glared at Bennett angrily, seeing that his food trick had worked. He gave me an innocent smile again and said, "Jasmine is such a polite and good child. Uncle also specially baked some cookies for Jasmine. Your mother doesn't seem very hungry. Jasmine, come and try them with me first." Really, Jasmine loves cookies the most. "Thank you, Bennett's father." The two of them got familiar with each other on their own, completely ignoring me, the mistress of this new house. I looked at their backs resentfully, but my stomach growled disobediently. In the end, I couldn't resist and joined them for the meal. Seeing Bennett and Jasmine interacting happily at the dining table, I suddenly felt a bit relieved. Jasmine hadn't been this lively for a long time. After dinner, we were all a bit tired from a busy day. Bennett said goodnight and went to the guest room to rest. I took Jasmine for a tour of the new house. When we saw the princess room filled with toys, Jasmine kissed me several times on the face, and then happily lay on the huge fluffy teddy bear and played. The master bedroom had also been neatly tidied up by Bennett. I suppressed the warmth welling up in my heart. I repeatedly edited the words, "Good night," on Instagram, deleting and retyping them. But in the end, I still didn't send them. I lay down and fell into a deep sleep. Day 5, Bennett and I purchased some more vegetables and fruits that were easy to store, as well as seeds, and started to study how to grow vegetables in the flower bed. We also added an enclosed glass cage on the terrace and raised some button quails. Button quails make little noise and are not likely to attract the attention of zombies. Even if the common eggs run out, we can still eat fresh button quail eggs. Day 6. Bennett suggested that we exchange the remaining money for gold. After all, no one knows whether money will become worthless in the future, but gold has always been a hard currency in civilized times. To avoid arousing suspicion, after exchanging a portion of the money at the bank, we went to a jewelry store and bought some gold ornaments. Bennett went to the toilet in the middle. When he came back, there seemed to be something extra in his upper pocket, which was bulging. In the evening, I called my parents and my brother to remind them to prepare some supplies and not to go out the day after tomorrow. I didn't say much more. After all, they were my blood relatives, and I was just fulfilling my duty. As for whether they would listen to me, I didn't really care. Bennett's parents passed away early, and he didn't have any other relatives, so he didn't have such concerns. Day 7. I asked for leave from my daughter's kindergarten teacher and checked with Bennett again whether the defense facilities were complete. Almost at 12 o'clock at night, I took out the locks that I had previously ordered from the construction team and prepared to lock several gates of the community. I wasn't doing this out of kindness. If there were too many zombies in this community, we wouldn't be able to live in peace even on the top floor. Trying to isolate the zombies outside the community as much as possible could avoid a lot of trouble and accidents. Bennett also wanted to go with me to lock the gates. I stood with my hands on my hips and said to him seriously, "Bennett, have you ever thought that if what I said is all false, this could be an offense against public order, and we could be detained?" Bennett propped up his chin and thought for a while. Then he replied solemnly, "If nothing happens tomorrow, I'll take the blame for you, but if I can't find a job and can't afford to eat after I get out of prison, then you have to take me in, Delilah." I turned my head to hold back my laughter and muttered softly, in a voice he couldn't hear, "If you go to prison and have a criminal record, how will your children be able to take the civil service examination in the future?" After that, we bribed the security guards of the community, although the security captain looked reluctant. Lured by so much money, he acquiesced to our actions and said that they would find someone to remove the locks at 9 o'clock the next day. After locking the gates, we went back, and by the way, locked the unit door. When we got home, we locked all the outside doors tightly. After doing all this, I finally let out a sigh of relief. When I returned to the room, I opened my phone and coldly looked at the moments posts by Xander and Vaughn, which were pictures of the delicious food in City A. Everything was coming to an end. In this life, I want to live well. Day 8, 8 o'clock in the morning, I was on the terrace, looking at the situation at the gate with a telescope. More and more residents couldn't get out because the gate was locked, and they started to scold the security guards. A bald middle-aged man grabbed the collar of the security captain and shouted angrily, "I have an order worth tens of millions. If I miss my flight, who will compensate me? Let me out right away, or I'll sue you." The security captain had no choice but to call me, "Madam, we can't hold off until 9 o'clock. Please come down and unlock the gate quickly." Before he could finish speaking, there was a sudden scream on the other end of the phone. Help, they're eating people." A woman covered in blood was lying on the gate of the community, holding the railing tightly with her hands and begging the people inside to save her. I saw from the telescope that this woman was exactly the snobbish saleswoman from before. Before she could finish speaking, a zombie pounced on her and bit off her neck in one bite. The bald man, who had been losing his temper just now, was splashed with blood and staggered to the ground. The zombie bared its teeth at the people inside the gate across the railing. Almost everyone was scared silly by the scene in front of them. I quickly replied to the security captain, "Hurry up and evacuate the crowd and let them all go home." Although the security captain was also very scared. After all, he had been in the army, and he immediately took action. Fortunately, the gate was already locked, and the residents obediently went home. No one in this community was infected. I hung up the phone and waited quietly for a while. Sure enough, Vaughn made an Instagram video call. They were in the hotel room at the moment. Vaughn in the video looked very embarrassed, with a bruise on her face, and Xander and Bo's clothes were also a bit tattered. As soon as Vaughn saw that I answered the video call, she started to curse. You unlucky jinx, if it weren't for your travel vouchers, we wouldn't have come here. This damn place is full of crazy people who bite others. Vaughn, how can you blame me? But I also want to thank you. I was originally going to take Jasmine to City A. Thanks to the three of you for taking the hit for us, I said. When I said this, Vaughn was furious and started to curse me loudly. I thought the effect wasn't enough, so I added fuel to the fire and said, Xander, you can just go on your way with your parents in peace. I'll take good care of your inheritance, and our daughter will change her surname to Jasmine. Your Zhou family will be completely without an heir in the future. When Xander heard this, he lost his mind, snatched the phone, and shouted at me, don't think that you two losers can survive. These monsters will bite you to death sooner or later. Xander, you don't have to worry about the safety of me and Jasmine. I won the lottery and now I'm lying in a luxury house, feeling very comfortable, I said. After hearing this, they finally noticed that the background behind me wasn't that small shabby house, and then they cursed even more fiercely, as their voices got louder and louder. There were also messy pounding sounds coming from outside the hotel room door. Bo quickly rushed over and slapped Vaughn and Xander, covering their mouths. You two idiots, those monsters heard you. I watched this farce and couldn't help laughing. Vaughn, didn't you say you were going to have your 50th birthday? As your daughter-in-law, I have a nice gift for you. After saying that, I pressed the button of a controller. A piercing alarm sounded from their suitcase, attracted by the sound. The roars outside the door also became louder and louder. The three of them were terrified. Xander quickly went to search for the alarm, but unfortunately, I had packed the luggage, and he couldn't find it after searching for a long time. Vaughn still didn't change her ways and cursed at me. You bitch, Delilah, turn that thing off quickly. I thought they were too noisy and I had had enough fun, so I turned off the Instagram video call with Vaughn and blocked her. Then I received a flood of messages from Xander and Bo, filled with all kinds of abusive words that were unbearable to read. I sneered and blocked them as well. Humph, they're on the verge of death, yet they still want to take their anger out on me. I opened the trending searches, and the top news was that the International Hotel in City A had fallen. I watched the live footage from the drone, which just happened to capture a guest room being broken into by zombies. Those three familiar and detestable figures were surrounded and bitten by the zombies, and they fell out of the window. I felt a great sense of relief in my heart. Everything was finally over. The people who had killed my daughter in the previous life had finally received their due punishment. I stretched, scattered a handful of feed for the button quails, and took care of the newly grown vegetable seedlings. Bennett brought breakfast to the terrace, seeing that I was in a good mood. He also guessed the reason. He didn't ask any more questions and silently had breakfast with me at the small table. The outside world had fallen into chaos, with screams, cries, and police sirens everywhere on the streets. We're not saints, we're just ordinary people, and we can't save everyone. All we can do is to protect our own small family. After all, locking the gates of the community wouldn't be understood before the zombies appeared. Let alone telling everyone that the end of the world was coming before that. If we publicized it, we might even be arrested for spreading rumors. Protecting this community was all we could do, and I also believe that the country will never give up on its people no matter what the situation is. In the previous life, despite the lack of supplies, so many families were able to hold on until the zombie vaccine was developed. Precisely because the National Army had been airdropping supplies to help ordinary people, all we need to do now is to stay in this house properly until the day of rescue arrives. After comforting myself, I looked at Bennett without saying a word, seemingly sensing my unease. He gave me a firm smile. Delilah, don't be afraid. No matter what happens, I'll stay by your side. After that, life was very ordinary. We had an abundant supply of goods and didn't need to go out at all. The food Bennett cooked tasted really good, and he would also make some baked desserts for us from time to time. After getting along for a period of time, Jasmine became more cheerful. Sometimes she wouldn't even come to play with me but instead pestered Bennett to tell her stories. One night, we were having a hot pot in the living room, and Bennett was busy preparing the ingredients in the kitchen. Jasmine tugged at my hand and coquettishly said, "Mom, I think Bennett's father is a really nice person. Can we keep living with him?" This little girl was really smart for her age. Seeing that Bennett had gone into the kitchen, I said to her seriously, "Jasmine, don't be naughty. Bennett's father will have his own life in the future. When the monsters outside are gone, Bennett's father will have to go back to his own home. You can't keep bothering him, understand? You're so stingy, Mom. I'm ignoring you." Jasmine pouted and turned her back to me angrily. Just as I finished speaking, I saw Bennett standing at the kitchen door with a burning gaze. I lowered my eyes and looked at the boiling soup in the pot. The only sound in the air was the gurgling of the bubbles. No one spoke for a minute. Finally, Bennett broke the silence. His voice was a bit low. "Jasmine, you can't be angry with your mother. You have to be a good girl." Then he turned around and went back to the kitchen. I raised my head and only caught a glimpse of the gloomy look that flashed across his face when he turned around. Jasmine responded injuredly and continued to eat the mutton slices in her bowl. In fact, I wasn't unaware of Bennett's feelings, but I could only pretend to be ignorant. I had thought of him countless nights in the past, tossing and turning and unable to fall asleep, but I was already married, and he had a bright future ahead of him. We were already a thing of the past. A regret. There shouldn't be any more interaction between him and me. I hoped to see him and hoped that he would have a good life. However, I didn't want to hold him back. Days passed by one, and we tacitly didn't mention that matter. Life remained as ordinary as before. In the blink of an eye, 2 months had passed, and the weather gradually became cooler. Since there was no weather forecast now, I didn't notice the subtle changes in temperature. One noon, I was sunbathing on the terrace and accidentally fell asleep. Suddenly, I was awakened by a cold wind. I sneezed and quickly went back into the house, but I still caught a cold. Unfortunately, the illness came on fiercely. The cold turned into a bad cold, and I had a high fever and fainted on the ground. I fell into a coma and had a very long dream. In the dream, Bennett was fully armed and shuttling through the streets full of zombies with several other people in the same gear. He was holding a list in his hand and seemed to be looking for something. They cleared away a lot of zombies along the way and checked each floor of the community one by one, rescuing many trapped families, until they came to a building that I was very familiar with. Bennett looked at the list in his hand and was a bit excited. When he cleared the zombies on the lower floors and reached the 5th floor, he saw that the door of the household on the list was wide open. And he instantly became devastated. A female zombie whose abdomen was almost bitten through turned around slowly when she heard the movement outside the door. Although her face was already broken, I could still recognize that person. That zombie was exactly me. Bennett took off his helmet tremblingly, and his eyes gradually became despairing. He softly called out, "Delilah." The me, who had become a zombie, reacted and shakily pounced towards him. I screamed and shouted for Bennett to get out of the way, but he seemed unable to see or hear me. Bennett didn't dodge. Instead, he opened his arms and hugged the zombie, allowing her to bite his neck. When I dreamed of this, I couldn't hold back my sobs any longer. In a half-awake and half-asleep state, I seemed to hear a familiar voice calling me. I struggled to wake up and found myself lying on the bed with an ice towel on my head. Bennett looked a bit tired. He was resting his head on his hand by the bedside and still mumbling my name, seemingly sensing my movement. He raised his head and asked with concern, "Do you feel any better? You had a high fever and slept in a coma for 2 days. Your temperature just dropped." Before he could finish speaking, I threw myself into his arms. At this moment, I didn't want to care about anything anymore. I just hugged him tightly and said, "Bennett, don't leave me." He responded to my hug and gently left a kiss on my forehead. "It's okay, this time, I'll never be separated from you again." 3 months later, a large number of helicopters and armored vehicles arrived in our city in a mighty manner. The huge loudspeakers conveyed the exciting news to all the citizens. Our country has successfully developed a zombie virus vaccine and is currently mass-producing it. Those terrifying walking corpses fell one after another under the powerful firepower. Fully armed soldiers and medical staff were searching from house to house for survivors. The residents of the community shouted in unison by the windows, "Long live the motherland! Long live the motherland!" Bennett and I stood on the terrace and watched all this. We couldn't help but join the cheering crowd. After that night, I also opened my heart, accepted him, and accepted myself. Some things in the past had become regrets, and I couldn't change them, but God had given me a chance to be reborn. And I couldn't be too greedy. The future is long, and I should cherish the person in front of me. I took Bennett's hand initiatively and said, "Today is really a good day. It's the 100th day since we reunited, and the zombie crisis has been lifted. Bennett, how about we regard today as our anniversary from now on?" Bennett looked at me tenderly and said, It's indeed a day worth commemorating. After saying that, he suddenly knelt down on one knee and took out a small square box from his upper pocket. He opened the box, and a diamond ring sparkled in the sunlight. "Ms. Delilah, would you like to spend the rest of your life with me?" "I do," I replied without hesitation. A warm and happy feeling welled up in my heart. Looking at the man in front of me who had always stood by my side through thick and thin, I knew that this time, I had made the right choice. After the celebration of the end of the zombie crisis, life gradually returned to normal. The city that had been devastated by the zombies began to be rebuilt. People worked together with great enthusiasm, hoping to restore their homeland to its former prosperity as soon as possible. Bennett and I also actively participated in the reconstruction work. He used his business acumen and connections to help the local government attract investment and promote economic development. On the other hand, used my experience and skills to participate in volunteer activities, taking care of the children and the elderly who had been affected by the disaster. Jasmine grew up happily in this warm environment. She became more confident and outgoing, making many friends at school. Every day when she came home, she would share with us the interesting things that happened at school, filling our home with laughter and joy. One day, Jasmine came back from school with a serious expression. "Mom, Dad," she said, using the name Dad for Bennett naturally now, "I want to do something to help the other children who are still suffering because of the disaster." Bennett and I looked at each other and smiled. We were very proud of our daughter's kindness and sense of responsibility. We discussed with her and decided to establish a charity foundation to help those children in need. With the joint efforts of the three of us and the support of many well-intentioned people, the charity foundation gradually grew and began to play an important role in the recovery and development of the city. We provided financial support, educational resources, and psychological counseling to the affected children, helping them regain their confidence and hope for the future. As time went by, our family became more and more harmonious. Bennett and I accompanied Jasmine to grow up, experiencing every bit of her growth and progress. We also cherished each other more and more, knowing that our relationship was not only a romantic love but also a deep emotional bond that had withstood the test of life and death. One evening, as we sat on the terrace enjoying the beautiful sunset, Bennett held my hand and said, "Delilah, looking back on everything we've been through, I feel that all the hardships were worth it because it brought us together and made us who we are today." I nodded, tears of happiness welling up in my eyes. "Yes, Bennett, we've overcome so many difficulties together, and now we have a wonderful family. I believe that no matter what challenges lie ahead, we will be able to face them together." At that moment, I knew that our story would continue, filled with love, warmth, and hope, and I was looking forward to spending every day of the future with my loved ones, creating more beautiful memories together.